Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting, Council Street, May the 9th, 2023 at 9 a.m. in council chambers. So first is to the approval of the agenda, and I'm assuming there are no late items. Thank you very much. Could I have the motion? Thank you. Councilor King, Councilor Paprika, all in favor. Thank you. And the next is the adoption of the Committee of the Whole minutes from April the 11th, 2023. I have a motion to adopt it. Councilor Bennett, Councilor Paprika, all in favor. Thank you. And we're now going down to petitions and delegations. And we have a letter from Dan and Carol Scott, a request to hook up to a sanitary sewer. So I wondered if you would like to come up to the microphone and explain your letter. Thank you.
Morning, Mayor and councilors. Thank you for giving us this time this morning. A little history. Many of you know our property. Some don't. We're on the west side of the lake. We're right at the Canada-US border. So we're the last property in Canada. We have 11 acres vineyard farm. We're planning. The Agricultural Land Commission has given us permission to subdivide into an 8-acre and 3-acre parcel. Our plan is to build a retirement home on the lake shore at 3 acres. So as building new, we're looking to hook up to the city sewer rather than building 2 new septic systems. The septic system for their existing home is on the other parcel, so it would have to be rebuilt as well. So rather than building 2 septic systems, you know, close proximity to the lake, we request that we hook up to the sewer. So looking the first picture that we sent you, the sewer line existing runs right down our property line. So there'd be no sort of disruption to any streets of the town for us to look into it. There's a big lot right next door to us on the farm. So we feel that would be a benefit without having any disruption. We've lived there since 1989. My wife's parents bought the property in 1968. So we've been there for quite a few years and we plan to stay here in this town. And so the lake quality is quite important to us. So we feel putting up to the sewer rather than building 2 new septic systems close to the lake. You know, the policy is not to supply services outside of town boundaries. But building new, we feel is a little bit different than the homes along the street, which already have functioning septic systems that can get put into it. Looking, you know, going forward, I'm sure in the next few years, there will be, you know, we'll probably end up joining into the town. So we feel that we can hook up now rather than build septic systems and in a few years end up having to hook up to the town. Sort of spending a lot of money at the beginning when we could hook up later. Yeah, we just feel it's sort of being proactive and trying to get more septic systems off the lake. The water quality is very important for everybody here. The rules here for the year in the town or in the regional district. Yeah, that's just, you know, where we're at and building new. We thought it would be good to cover it from the start.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Scott. We appreciate it, and certainly preserving our lake quality. The water is really important. So I'm just going to see if anybody in council, go ahead.
Is there still a trailer park down there?
No, that has been removed. So it's existing right now as we've expanded about vineyard where the trailer park used to be. So we're planting the process right now, planting another couple acres. So the farm will be the 8 acres and then just a lot down below, and we're just planning to build 1 home down there. So it won't be we're not subdividing into a bunch of lots. That's just 1 retirement home for ourselves.
Okay.
If you have a lift station down there, does it have the capacity for more sewer?
Through the chair, Councilor King. I would have to look into that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the lift station is just crossing the boundary of the property next to us. But yeah, that's And the existing line is right down our property.
Well, thank you very much. I would like to suggest that we ask Mr. Brownstein to come back at some point with a report on what is available down there and what the recommendations are. And of course, it's in the regional district, so it's not in town, but there is a town line that goes down there. It was put in there just when the border was redone, and it's a lift station that provides sewer to the border. That's all, not anybody in between. Anybody, because I live down there as well, so we could Mr. Brownstein, would you be able to, or staff, to be able to do a report on this and come back with what's available and what the options are? Would that be appropriate?
Your worship, yeah, make a motion at some point during the meeting to ask, committee can't make decisions.
No.
So we have to go to council, then to provide direction to administration.
Perfect, because could someone make a resolution that we ask staff to do report on this?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
So it have to be actually going to council.
So I move it to this afternoon.
We can move it to this afternoon.
Yes.
We bring this up
Yeah,
again
the
and
committee.
then ask.
Okay, the committee recommends the council to make the following motion, which is to, for administration to investigate the expansion of sewer services.
Of the town, so on the east side. Would, is that?
West side.
So I guess the
Sorry,
question I have for the
Piggy,
committee is
sorry.
this. Do you want to look at just this property, or do you want to look at the entire south part of town? Once we include one, you're including multiple, I'm sorry, can do that, it's not that agreement.
It would make sense to look at the whole system. We've been asked by a couple of other people as well too. Could we look into what the capacity is, what's there, and whether it's feasible?
No, that's what I just wanted to do. Jared, I agree with what you're saying. I think that we have to be careful. Not like the one up and then one edge part here, and then over here, right? Only you're in these situations, at the very end, there's a lift station. Yeah, and the guy down the road wants to name one too, so it's gotta be. Yes, you gotta be careful how we do it.
Yes, we understand that, and we're just, like I said, it's a unique property, and with being at the end of the line, there's no disruption down the line at this point. So,
And that's one direction.
Okay, your worship, this is a bigger project.
Yes,
This is not just,
not just the
not
one.
small,
property.
this is
Yeah.
when we are doing water and wastewater master plans, which will have potentially some of that information in it, so this is this is not a, even though it seems small, one hookup, it is much larger, bigger project. This is
So it would be better to include this in when we do the wastewater master plan and I'm just not sure whether there's a timeline on your ask or not, or like, if you were wanting to have this, you would want to have it sooner than later. I
yes,
assume.
yes, we're planning to start building this year. So, yeah, there's a bit of a timeline.
So your worship.
Yes.
The extraterritorial improvements in the wastewater system were not included within the scope of the master plan.
Okay.
Master plan about that in town and not providing service in outside town boundaries, so this would be in addition.
This would be an addition. So what's the best way to deal with this? Just to have a look at, this particular issue, or to look at the 32nd to the border on the west side of the lake?
personally, your worship, I think, I don't like doing one-offs, because then you have another one-off, another one-off, another one-off. Although I can appreciate, not from the presenters' perspective, they're wanting to move as quickly as possible, but their issues dealt with. I have concern with that, and think that it should be something that a bigger overview project.
Yes.
Just, because I think there have been, since I've been here, few requests for water and sewer hookup outside our boundaries and, yeah, I think it's a bigger picture that council needs to grapple with, and administration needs to provide some information so that a decision can be made, either we're doing it or we're not. Because what makes one property owner, giving them approval and saying no and others, so having some clear guidelines as to where council wants to go is important. And right now, comes to council, and pretty much the requirement is what benefit is there to the community. Our interpretation of that is that there's a financial benefit. Because a lot of these properties are not paying to our overall municipal tax base to fund a lot of our other infrastructure pieces, or even on the, we know that our utilities are not even close to really breaking even from an amortization piece. So this is a big discussion. And then this afternoon, I mean, or later on this morning, we'll be talking about council's strategic priorities. Right now, council's direction has been not to expand significantly, it's to grow incrementally. So it's part of that whole discussion, maybe even can continue later on this morning with regard to council's strategic priorities. That's a long answer, but it's a very big and complex issue.
And I've lived down there in that area long enough that I do know that down 91st Street, there was a sewer line put in order to have the border when the new building on the American side and the Canadian side was put in. And that was about 20 years ago. That line, my understanding is that it is not large enough or comprehensive enough to include anything more than the border at this point. And I'm not sure whether I remember that or not, but 20 years ago, it was put in to service the border only, and nobody in between was able to hook up to. Am I correct on that, or is that part of what you?
So your worship, that's something we'd have to look into.
Sure.
Convert capacity
Okay.
on that pump station to the force main.
So that would be the other option, may not be able to include. So could we have? We have a motion to bring this back this afternoon, but what is the motion that we, or are we?
So the other option is, didn't we talk about strategic priorities in an hour or 2 hours?
Yeah.
Maybe time to actually talk about some of the things that you want us to add to the list.
Sure. So we could leave it until that time and look at it then, okay? So thank you very much for coming and providing this, sorry.
Well, this actually question with CEO, if we go further in the agenda, can we come back and put this on this afternoon if we so desire? Or it's already over then?
Well, no, so this exact topic is part of your strategic priorities. So council wants to add to the list, investigating expansion, that type of thing. It's a perfect opportunity at that point to include within the strategic priorities, which then you will be making them over to say for council to adopt.
I just want to make sure we don't miss the opportunity again.
No,
Yeah.
you will definitely will not.
So it's confusing and complicated and we will have to look at it further.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
All right, Rishi, time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, we now are looking for destination experience financial review, and we have the executive director. Would you like to come on to the- Thank you. Good morning. Good morning.
Okay, so, as per our agreement, we are reviewing our 2022 audited financials. And so what I've done is I've taken the liberty of, creating you a summary of what's in that very long and dry document that we get every year. I need to go down a bit. Not that you can't hear me. So, in the financial review, if you just move forward, thanks. We'll have the opinion of the auditors, review of revenues and expenses, the statement of our financial position, and an opportunity for questions. So, Olin Heel is our, auditor, and, they are reviewing our finances, and we are moving to a full audit every 5 years. The reason we've done that is obviously expense, also a very comfortable and solid track record over the last 7 years. And we've been allowed to do so by the Societies Act. The Societies Act has shifted and relaxed quite a bit. It used to be every 3 years and now it's every 5. So we do a review as opposed to a full audit. So next year will be a full audit. They were prepared in accordance to the not-for-profit organization standards and requirements. Based on their review, nothing has come to their attention. And the financial statements present all things fairly and clearly. So, our revenue. So you can see that our MRDT has increased fairly significantly for those of you that have been around for a long time. That is largely due to a few things. One of them being COVID, believe it or not. COVID created a new awareness for Destination Osoyoos or our community as a small and safe place to be. So we had a lot of people here during that 3-year period, which increased our exposure and carried on with growing. The other thing that changed is we adopted a 3% MRDT in 2019. So just before COVID. And that extra 1% does make a significant difference. And then in addition to that, the overall province was up by 22% in visitation. We were fortunate to be actually up by 42%. And so there you have the representation of that revenue number. Also, average rates in hotels went up very significantly as well. And I think you'll notice that if you've traveled anywhere at all in the world, you're paying a lot more for your hotel rooms. We were also very successful in grant applications. Again, this has a lot to do with the province and the want and need to get tourism back on track within the province. And so we took advantage of those grants and applied for and received some of those grants. And our fee for service, which doesn't really change every year, remains at 137,000. Our retail event and ticket sales were up because we have really done well with our retail outlet. A retail outlet, as you can see, earned us almost $80,000. We started in the retail roughly about the same time we moved our operation up to the visitor center on the hill, and we sort of approached it very modestly, and as we were successful, we increased. And so what we do is continually look at what other people are selling in our community to make sure we're not overlapping. And we also look at those gaps that have been created by some of our businesses that have closed. We're not going into the ladies' clothing business, but jewelry is one area that allowed us to expand when the closure of 85th Street came along. So and the girls work very hard and they find it sort of an entertaining thing to pass the day by having those sales competitions. And so it's really paid off. We've done well. And then, of course, we held our Fire and Ice winter event, which is a partnership between Town of Oliver or Oliver Tourism and the OIB. So this is a collective group that puts on a week-long winter event that we call Fire and Ice. And we did sell tickets to that. Destination Osoyoos' commitment to the Fire and Ice event is marketing and sales, and we put that forward as our investment. And so, the ticket sales, that we earned came back to us to compensate for what we put in. We put in roughly $25,000 to market that event. So as you can see, our total revenue is at 165,000. Our expenses, marketing, 653,776, visitor center or visitor services is 210,000, roughly 211,000. And operations is remaining around 156,000. So operations remains roughly the same in terms of expenses as does visitor services. However, we increase marketing as we increase our income. And so you may have noticed that there's quite a few other campaigns that we haven't had the pleasure of being able to do in past years. Mostly global television, that's a very pricey marketing initiative. And we've moved into the Alberta market as well. In addition to that, we've invested in data collection. Everybody and their dog needs more data, more data. How many dollars does somebody spend in this period, in this market, in that market? These are necessary numbers for people who are coming to our community or expanding their business to know so they can make the right financial decisions. It's also necessary for us to have in order for us to move forward with grant applications. The bigger the grant applications, we require more information, as do our partners. We work with the town of Osoyoos to complete the RMI report every year. And it seems that they are asking for more and more all the time. So very necessary investment there. That was $25,000 and will be every year. So this is our first year. We're monitoring it very closely. We're going to make sure we utilize it and share that information and then have a look at it next year to ensure that that's something we still want to spend that kind of money on. So our revenue over expenses was roughly it's $239,619. I'd like to point out that that is what we've been carrying over every year since I joined Destination Osoyoos. And if you understand our finances, we need that money to be carried over because that's literally what we live on in July or January and February and sometimes March. Very, very slow months. And so that carryover keeps us going. Again, because of COVID, our carryover money began to accumulate. And so that is what is representative of what sits in our bank account. If you did take the moment to review the actual financial statements, I think it's actually here as well. You can see the variances in our revenue over last year. Again, stayed flat for fee for service. Our ticket sales were up, and I explained why. Other revenues are basically little notes that tell me what the other revenue was. Are not there. But I can tell you that they were related to grants, money that we would get from the federal government for job programs, and also money that we would get for brochure wrapping. We charge a nominal fee to businesses that don't reside within our catchment area to wrap brochures, that sort of thing. Yeah, the grants are down, and that is because, again, of COVID. The grants available to us during COVID were huge, and we did take advantage of them. But they're dwindling away. We won't have them again, and I've always known that. So I've always been very prudent about our finances to ensure that we don't become dependent upon those grants, because I knew that COVID was sparking some stuff that just won't be there in the future. The variances in our expenses, we've spent more money in 2022 than we did in 2021. COVID, the marketing, that's the reason for the huge difference in the marketing expense. We weren't actually allowed to spend money during some part of 2021. Our money does come from the province of British Columbia, and Destination BC does oversee that to some degree. And they did not want us to be marketing at all. And that was through the health, the provincial health organization, as it trickled down. So you can see that. So our assets. So if you go right to the bottom line, you'll see our assets are 1.474 as opposed to 1.235, which gives you that difference of the carryover fund. Is there any question?
Thank you very much. And we do have some budget.
What I found.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Two comments. First of all, I think we do a great job in marketing as a whole for the town, and thank you very much. Is there, you have a criteria to market, say, small events in town, or you just kind of market the town as a whole?
We market the community as a whole. Funding festivals directly, each individual festival was something Destination Osoyoos did. We found it to be presented lots of difficulties. And so the board passed a motion, whereas we would not individually fund an event, but we would fund the marketing. So we've done our very best to make sure all of the Festival Society and all of the different groups know that if they bring us the information, we will do all the marketing to our own cost. Where we stop that is in the purchase of or development of posters. We don't do that, and we don't create itineraries. But we will do all the print advertising that's required, which makes sense for that particular event, whether that's newspapers or trade magazines. Obviously, everything digital we do, and we also do all social media. So, as I mentioned earlier, we spent about $20,000 to market the Fire and Ice event. That might be a bit more than usual to market an event simply because it was a winter event and it was our first one and we really needed that to be successful. So I would say in rough terms, we would spend equal to $10,000 to $15,000 on an event if they come to us with their full requirement. Getting harder and harder to get people to understand that that's what we do as opposed to just writing a check. But it's coming along.
And then just one other question. It looks like you got a war chest and a lot of cash. Is that just timing on expenses?
It is. And as I mentioned earlier, we accrued a lot of money because for basically 3 years, we weren't really allowed to spend any money. So what we're doing with our war chest is we have first of all created reserved fund accounts. So we have a reserve fund account for marketing that's capped at $200,000, and that is in the event that we run into some situation where what we have aside for marketing and our plan for marketing isn't enough. We've run into some sort of natural disaster or otherwise, and we just really need to pour it on a little heavier. So we've got $200,000 there, and that account will stay at $200,000. So if it gets used, then we top it back up again. We also have a reserve account for our operations. So in the event that something happens, the Destination Osoyoos must wind down, we will have a year's worth of expenses in that capped account in order for us to be able to do the wind down process. And then in addition to that, although it's not in our reserve funds, well, it is actually, I apologize. You may be aware that we have OAP funds as well as MRDT. So MRDT is what we call our core funding. And OAP is the online accommodation platform. So this is the new MRDT that came into place in 2018. Through the provincial government that allows you to use that money that comes in, and it is accounted for separately by government as well as us, for affordable housing projects. Jean is well aware of this money and has been since day one. We've talked about different things, but unfortunately, due to our particular situation here in Osoyoos with short-term rentals, we don't really know. So we're getting some money. Up until this last year, we only got about 30,000 a year. So not a lot for the town to build an affordable housing program against. The rules around how we do that is that it would be a partnership between Destination Osoyoos and the town of Osoyoos. And we would have to write a business plan, and then it would go to government, and it would also go to the Affordable Housing Ministry for approval. It would also require input from our stakeholders. So what we decided to do is, when we saw that our OAP funds came up to $60,000, we knew that we wanted to help with the employee housing issue in Osoyoos. Daniel Bibby is as the chair of the Osoyoos Employee Housing Society, and also happens to be one of our board members. So without Daniel present, we voted and determined that we would commit that $60,000 every year for 3 years. And we are in the process of creating the MOU. So the process will be that we will hand over that money once we receive an annual plan for the money. And then at the end of the year, we need to see what happened to the money. And then next year we would carry on. It is our intention to grow that fund and to carry on into hopefully perpetuity until we actually have enough money to have a decent, proper employee housing facility that would be run by the Employee Housing Society. Destination Osoyoos would only be a funder, and that would be, of course, through the taxes that we collect from the accommodation online platform. And at this time, that is the rule. We cannot use our core funding for anything more than what's already currently outlined. Things are changing, as I'm sure some of you are well aware. Ministry, or my tax, as we call them, are looking at everything for a more resilient tourism industry within British Columbia, and to somewhat equal the playing field for some communities. I also sit on the BCDMOA, which is the BC Destination Management Organization Association. And we are, to some degree, a political lobby group to ensure that we're constantly engaged with the ministry on MRDT and how it's being used. We understand there may be changes coming, and we just want to make sure that the changes are the right changes and don't impact us in a significantly negative way.
Did you have a question? Nothing in the marriage. I just wanted to congratulate you. I think that, again, I was going to try and explain money sitting in the bank account and just sitting there for emergency day. Maybe 1 year we go along and promotion goes like this, and also have a national disaster. Now you're going to lose about the next 2, 3, 4 years to build that up. You're going to be using those funds. And you did a way better job explaining it.
Well, when it comes to not-for-profit societies, you have to be very on top of how you're managing your money and what you can do with it. I did talk to the accounting firm to find out what am I allowed to do. And we are allowed to invest, but nothing too sexy, like GICs or something like that. And so I feel that what is a better idea is to find more ways to get money into the hands of our stakeholders. Last year, we saw that we had a bit of a surplus, and so we created a new $50,000 fund, which we purchased some media advertising and then put it out there to the members that these two vehicles were available. One was Vancouver focused for businesses that felt they could still draw that market. And one was for Valley, and so it was for smaller businesses. Basically just give us your material, give us your information, and it is free of charge to you. I see us continuing to do that. But what we need is a little more feedback from our stakeholder community so that we can be more targeted on some of the things that we actually put out there. And put money towards.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Glazer. You always are a lot of information to give to us, and thank you for the report. We are happy that you're doing well.
We are. And just on another note, you're all probably aware, but we are starting our tourism master planning tomorrow. And so we'll have our first meeting tomorrow, and we have a number of people from council involved and other people in the community. As we move towards having a long-term master plan that involves all of us and how we are doing and what we see. And sustainability is going to be a big part of that conversation. And so I'm excited about that. It's a bit of a shift for us. But I think we're there now. And also Destination BC will be joining us at our next board meeting on June the 7th. And we'll be talking more about that and the provincial overview of sustainability is and how we can marry into that. I think some people are very worried that sustainability means you stop marketing and you start focusing on other things, and that's absolutely not the case. We see ourselves as an informational partner to our stakeholders to help them be sustainable in the businesses that they operate, as well as our own.
Well, thank you very much
Okay.
for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to move on to the 85th Street Plaza. I think that WSP Canada is Robert Foreshore, have I pronounced that correctly?
Pretty darn close.
Okay. Well, welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council and City staff. I'm here today to present an update for you on the 85th Street Plaza we've been developing. We can pull that one up. I'll go through it pretty quickly. I believe you've had a chance to read some of it, and we've got a pretty busy agenda today. So I'm going to go through three parts: funding and the budget, and kind of the vision as part of that, summary of the phase one design and where we're at with the status right now, and then a quick section on the next steps right at the very end. So part one, good news, the government came through with some funding. So we've been working on the 85th Street Plaza for probably about 6 months, and then the opportunity for this grant came around. We changed course a little bit. We brought in some design elements that really catered to the destination development funding. We helped the city work with the CAO and development staff to put forth the grant proposal, which you guys were successful. So congratulations. $500,000 on that. Additional RMI funding at $300,000 for an overall project budget of roughly $800,000. Initially, when we looked at this and for the grant application, we looked at this as phase one and phase two. Phase one being from the highway to the alley, and then phase two be the latter back part of the site and the parking. For this work here, we kind of focused back on phase one, knowing that's the target budget that we have. I won't really go through these except to point out that the goals and objectives that you set early on in your downtown revitalization strategy really spoke to a lot of the points in the grant. So just following forward on the work that's previously done, it set you up quite well for success with the destination development. So quickly going through the design. This here was a list of key improvements that we had anticipated and had hoped for. So the introduction of street trees, an urban shade amenity, misting stations and drinking fountains. We wanted it to be fully accessible with multiple seating configurations and opportunities. We wanted to include signage and wayfinding, the addition of public art, and we wanted it to be quite flexible. So to support exterior planning and programming for the site. The one thing that we could not achieve with the budget we now have is a washroom and storage facility. Single stall washer, we looked at models like Portland Blue, which is used in Kelowna, Nelson, Cranbrook, other cities have used it. That alone for a single stall is between 300,000 and 400,000. So bathrooms get very expensive very quickly, and it wasn't part of the plan for this, but potentially it can be planned for this year. So just pointing out a few things, we have heard some feedback. Obviously, we haven't really looked at progressing this design until we knew about the success on the grant, because we knew it was going to be grant dependent. The overall plan hasn't changed a lot. We will be looking at a few things. We'll be removing the basketball hoops from the back of the site. We'll be adding a bike repair station along with the bike racks. The other features that were quite important in the grant application to deal with climate, and hence, our work on a tensile shade structure, the increased tree canopy, and the misting and cooling station, and the treatment of some of the surfaces, all played into that. Signage and wayfinding is another strong component of the grant, and that's something we can talk about a little bit more that has progressed in that. When we talk about signage and wayfinding, we've got two typologies we're including, and I'll show them on the next slide. But for this particular plaza, we have a main park entry sign or plaza entry sign, and we're also proposing that there is some type of plaza wayfinding downtown wayfinding component to this. In concert with the work we're doing here, we were asked to develop a set of conceptual park entry signs, and I believe council has seen these signs. For this site, we're looking at the park main entry sign and the park information sign. We wouldn't include the park wayfinding markers here. And I told Gina and Gerald that I talk a little bit more into where this has gone right now. We're currently working with or exploring options with multiple fabricators throughout the valley to see how we can cost effectively manufacture these and almost do them in bulk. So the idea behind these is that they are a combination of concrete and rammed earth structures. And basically, you're essentially creating panels of different sizes for options 1 and 2. With that, the city would have an inventory based on a prescribed number that you think you're going to need over time. And basically, the base work is done by the contractor putting in the footing and the lighting and electrical. The panel is simply mounted on top and epoxy pinned in place, and the lettering of design into the structure. So it's a fairly simple strategy, but we believe the aesthetic and the content that we can get on these signs is quite suitable for the scale and the aesthetic of the space. I won't go through this, but reinforce the rammed earth is a system that's been around for a very long time. Everyone here's been, I think, me and has seen the use of rammed earth. I won't go through it, but it is a very sustainable approach to construction. And it's, to me, it's a beautiful aesthetic. No two panels are the same. You're not prefabricating a sign and plunking it over. It's always going to have slight variations. So there's the Incommute Desert Cultural Center on the left. There's a couple other strategies here showing how you can simply pin letters, you can recess letters, you can sandblast relief into the panels. So there's many ways to start looking at how we can finalize this. One thing that came up in the discussion about wayfinding was a digital signage board. We did look at that. The expense and maintenance behind digital signage boards. We're finding more and more in communities they're going with traditional community boards. We just completed a park in downtown Kelowna. The idea was discussed back and forth quite a bit. In the end, they went with something quite similar to the left side, a simple lockable LED lit signage panel. It's going to be run by a neighborhood association that resides in the area of that park. Eventually, it will be moved to a new building structure. At that point, it might make sense for them to move to a digital board where the building can actually manage it and it can be up in a location that's a bit more grounded. On the right, there is also the exploration we're going to be doing with a new banner sign going across. Currently, the system in place for that banner sign is somewhat difficult to use. There are better systems in place to get these things up. Obviously, this is a discussion we'll also have to have with MIT in what will allow us to do at the site. But those are two considerations for signage for including above and beyond.
Excuse me, is that included in the budget, that sign, if we were to go forward? Across the street?
Across the street, we're exploring that. It was not in the original budget. It's similar to a flagpole system,
Oh, I
it's not
understand.
that complex, so.
That's not in the budget.
It's not in the budget. Shade structures are in the budget. Shade structures are quite interesting, and there's a lot of, I won't go through some of the specifics, but there's many different ways you can approach shade structures. You can have temporary ones, you can have permanent ones, you can have a combination. You can look at year-round protection, which typically increases the cost of canopy and materials. Usually you get a better warranty with those as well. So there's going to be a lot that we're researching right now on how we do this. Obviously, they add a ton of character to the space. They instantly bring that splash of color throughout the year in the off seasons. And most importantly, they provide shape. Lots of points to consider: size, height, angle, positioning, quantity, the opacity of the fabric. There's a whole string of considerations. When it comes down to it, the cost of the fabric is about 10% of the cost of the structure. So the bigger the structure, obviously the bigger supports, the more infrastructure in the ground, the more tension that has to be held on those poles. So the real cost becomes the size, but it's not really in the fabric. The fabric is more of an upgrade cost to whatever you want to provide. When we looked, and we're just starting our explorations here, knowing that the project received funding. There's multiple options we're going to be exploring as we go through this to understand how much coverage we can get. One is a large sail with a full replacement. We can just kind of go through these. Option 2 is looking at more than one sail, optional sails with more rear replacement. Another option could be a multitude of smaller sails, some interconnected at different heights. Picture on the bottom right kind of starts to illustrate the type of effect you can get there. We can also start linking sails. So still pulls to the outside, and you start to link and create sails. I talked a little bit about this. I won't get into this, but it's kind of endless. The colors, the configurations, the size. We can really customize this for the space. Yeah, and I talked a little bit about this. I won't get into it now because we're just exploring the costs associated with it. But really, it depends on the size and number of sails. Just a few local examples we threw in here. I also was driving through Oliver and saw that they have one in their Centennial Park in downtown. But a lot of locations you can get pretty close to take a look at how they operate. Just briefing on the plaza amenities that are still included at this point. Obviously, the shade sails. We will be electrifying the site, so we're providing service kiosks. So larger events, concerts that need more power, food trucks that need specific plugins, that will be accounted for and will allow for those trucks to move into space for festivals. Bike racks, and I think this was a request to add the bike station. These are quite effective when we can prevent people from cutting all the tools off. So there's a replacement component to these. We'd suggest also the one bike pump is quite useful. It comes as an add-on to this feature. On the bottom right, obviously a fully accessible drinking fountain with the water bottle refill and the pet station. It's kind of a commonplace in most parts we do now. And then bottom left, again, talking about that flexibility of having an open space or having a fully programmable space. Other features we've looked at are potentially planting a Christmas tree So you have an annual Christmas tree that doesn't have to be brought in, but it's just part of the overall design of the plaza. Other recreational features like ping pong tables, we're introducing these into quite a lot of our parks now. The misting station, I think, is key for this site. That's on the bottom right. And on the top right, I just showed it's a recent park that's about to open in Kelowna, where we use bog pavers. These ones are a bit beyond the budget of this. I think bog pavers for this plaza were about $300,000. But I wanted to show the introduction of different materials. So in this park, we've got 4 or 5 different materials. And what you're seeing there is actually large local boulders that were integrated into the site into a rubberized surface. So we're able to cool that surface, create a permeable surface. Still have things like fog and misters occur without creating slippery surfaces. And for me, in this park, it adds a bit of playfulness. There's no park playground program into the site, but we were able to do a lot with the programmable LEDs. The fog pavers are really good. They use about, I think this whole system uses 4 gallons per minute of potable water when it's fully operational and running. And it's activated by seismic control, so you can roll a wheelchair over it. You can step near it, and the fog pavers will activate. And they also come with a light program. So they're really expensive, but they're really animating their space. Some of the other amenities that we will include, some we already have, they were purchased as part of the test closure of the site. So there's a full line of wishbone furnishings, from picnic tables, benches to Adirondacks, garbage receptacles, and bike racks would be the other line of the wishbone furniture. So I didn't put my next steps in here, but really what we're going forward with now is the development of the drawing. We took the drawings to about a 50 to 60% design development so that we could be eligible for the grant and have enough to get the class, probably just going to class B, class C for the site. Now we're putting together our civil engineers, our irrigation designers, and our electrical consultants to start moving this forward to tender rate set. Jared, I don't know if there's a schedule for when we're aiming to issue this project to tender.
So yeah, I'd like to get this probably tendered within the next month or 2 for the construction start date in September this year.
So that's in our mind quite achievable. We know there's going to be a bit of back and forth, and we have a few meetings with stakeholders of MLT to get through. But yeah, that's the plan. In the next 2 months, we issue a draft tender, and I believe it's going to go to an RFP tender. Questions?
Yeah, thank you very much for presenting this, and I'm sure that we all have questions. So, Councillor Bennett, you go ahead first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Great job. Questions, I'm looking here and the poles are away from the buildings. I think we put the poles, it has to do with buildings and stuff. And you're gonna have to be talking bank commercial all of the kilometers. And I would hold things back quite a bit versus poles, but I could see where it'd be less than us by having them attached to the building. So the attached to buildings doesn't really.
No, I don't. I think we talked about that here, but yeah, it would be full structures. I think about full structures too. We can get a bit more creative with those and actually mount lights poles to create very interesting effects on the underside of the canopies. So yeah, poles is I'd say 99% creative.
When you get to the tanky part, because of what the parking.
Go ahead, Councillor King.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess I'm just looking at your park wayfinding marker. You're talking about putting stainless steel plates on them. And that'd be changed because those will become very red hot for kids to touch, right? Like touch.
Sorry,
So
for the wayfinding.
yeah, you're talking about putting stainless steel information on the pole in your drawing.
Oh,
So I just want to
lettering.
change that.
Yeah, for sure.
Or something that won't frighten kids if somebody touches them.
Yeah, so the sign panel itself will simply be concrete around dirt.
The wayfinding marker. Sure.
Oh, the marker itself.
Yeah. If we chose a stainless steel plate for the information on, I'm just wondering if you could look at something else.
Yeah, so what that'll end up being is, typically what we'll do with those, it's an aluminum plate, and then it's a vinyl coating of the logos or the icons for directional signage. So it won't be any hotter than a parking sign or anything like that.
And one other comment, and I guess looking at the trees, I think they beautify the facility, but I have concerns about how much water they're gonna take. And we just looked at a bunch of trees on the streets that gotta be pulled out, so over time they'll get so big that they'll ruin the concrete or whatever.
Yeah, so there's lots of ways as landscape architects we deal with this. The one thing I should mention, how we're dealing with water, we've got a slight crown on the street. We're actually gonna take that to our advantage and really draining all surface runoff to the tree locations. In terms of protecting concrete, the trees on Main Street, they've got a few problems. They're girdled, they don't have enough room. It's probably the biggest. They probably don't have enough soil volumes. They're probably about half the size they should be by now. What we'll do in this part is look at strategies for ensuring the trees have sufficient volume of soil so that they don't need to crawl into the concrete. We also always use things like concrete root barrier, which is basically just a plastic sheet that directs all the root growth to a level below the concrete that doesn't affect the surface. So there's ways we'll look at it, and obviously we'll look at specific trees that are right for this climate. We do want to create shade with them, but we also know we don't want to create nuisances with too much leaf litter or seed drop or sap. We don't want to annoy the residents or the businesses next door with too low of a canopy that blocks visibility to the storefronts. So there's considerations that we certainly move forward.
Look forward to the next presentation.
Can I just ask, you've got 4 options in terms of the sale coverage, and are you looking at what we think is best, or are you just presenting those and you will then decide?
We'll come forward with the recommendations.
Okay,
So we were just showing some options of potential configurations that we're going to be exploring as we move into details.
So your worship, just like to interrupt on this, this is council's or the community's last pick of the can. I just want to make that clear. That we're looking for our suggestions from the committee in regards to design aspects of the plaza. It is not coming back until RFP award.
and
So
the
this is-
sales
this
as
is-
well?
This is your guys' last review, and I think you guys will provide some feedback to WSP on final design aspects community would like to see in regards to the plaza.
Because I looked at them all, I can't figure out which one to me looks better than another, so I'm not sure. My one concern though is that when we've done street banners, and I know they're probably not nearly as complex as doing the sales. With this climate, the sun and the dryness, they don't last as long as they normally would in another climate. So I think that needs to be taken into consideration when you're looking at the material that goes on there, because it says 15 years, but I don't think in this climate it would last that long. However, that was some time back when Destination Studios put out all the signs, and honestly, they just faded and fell apart way more quickly than we anticipated. So I just think that needs to be looked at carefully when you do that. So council, does anybody have any?
I like to add flavor to the atmosphere there. I like your option 3 with multiple swales. They're a little bit smaller, they're more likely easier to change, and they to me might last longer, subject to sun. Just with different colors, it's gonna add a lot more atmosphere to the plaza, personally.
Go ahead, Councilor Myrie.
I echo Council Cape's comments. I think looking at that location this weekend with the events that were taking place and the weather that we had. I think I like the color aspect. It's also spreading out that shade shelter aspect. Because you did see those that did brave the weather, sat during the rain. It'd be nice to have that shelter, and I think the other one too, versus the larger front covering is making sure we still keep that plaza area nice and open in the center and then pushing things on the side. But I do like the color aspect that is presented in option number 3. And kind of opening, spreading that area out a bit, the shade structure.
Yeah, and again, like I said, the more structures, the more poles, the more poles, the more cost. So we have to start looking at some of these, but I do like the points raised about that. And in terms of the colors, we'll also explore the color. There are colors that, you know, we wouldn't want to go with bright teal, because we know that's going to fade to an ugly light green over 5 years. So we'll start looking at the color options and also those elements.
Absolutely, and I think we need to be very careful about color. We've already gone through that once this year.
Ours are kind of blue and gold, so you're kind of.
But there are certainly different colors, because on our new signage, we've come up with some different shades.
And I would suggest that there's other ways of, you know, the poles could be colors. The
Yeah.
sails could be white. White in a landscape with a green canopy of trees is quite powerful as well. So we'll look at those and we'll develop options.
And yeah, I agree with you, and I think that if we put in more sales and there's more costs, we need to look at that as well. And I'm wondering about the winter time with, I mean, ice and snow and wind is common here, not for long, but it can, you know, that could be a concern. So is there a thought to perhaps taking the sales down for 6 months and having them up for 6? Is that part of the thinking as well, or? I wasn't
I mean,
sure.
I would really go back to operations, like,
Yeah.
you know, we've done 25 by 25 foot umbrellas, fold out umbrellas. In plazas in pretty windy places, and they're rated for hurricane winds, so they're built to last. The more robust they are, the more expensive they are. Sure, it might be that a cheaper option with, you know, a 3 or 4 month removal throughout the winter is a more feasible option.
I totally understand. I'm just glad that you're thinking about all of that. And I like the Christmas tree, because anybody who's lived here for a long time, at the foot of Main Street, where the flashing light is now, the stoplight, we used to have a Christmas tree that was put in there every year. But as soon as the stoplight came in, we couldn't. But it was a tradition that having a lighted tree at the end of Main Street was it was really good. And I know we can't have that, so having one in there, as long as it doesn't take up too much room, that would be the only problem. So can I just check with you that the 800,000 in the budget is what we're looking at?
That is correct, Your Worship.
We're not adding more to that. We're working within that framework.
This will be a decision of the community and council at some point, with the current construction environment. The 800 grand may not be enough. So the options will be either to increase the budget to encompass all the amenities in which the community and council would like to see, or you start moving amenities to fall within the budget allowance. So that'll be a discussion that we'll have with council once RFPs have closed.
And I will just add that we did use pretty conservative unit rates based on construction from 2022 when we did this. That said, there's been crazy escalation rates in some of the construction materials.
No, we know. And did you have something on that? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just in Jared, the banner across the Main Street here, and showing us that part of this, is that just for nostalgia kind of? So that's kind of a separate problem.
Yeah, so through the chair of council, that's not included in the scope of the plaza. It was something that was identified as we started to review the design of the plaza. We had those great big concrete poles right in the middle. Through discussions with MOTI and through WSP, we need to have a permanent structure if we're going to stand on provincial highway. So there are options to actually move it to another location, which again is in preliminary discussions. There's options of moving it to say Park Place, but there's going to be concerns with allocation due to the noise that these banners can create. Maybe there's options that also would go away from a banner across the Main Street, going to pole banners. Again, we haven't really dove into that in great detail as of yet, but that's the question, no, this is not included in the final plan.
Okay, and go ahead, Councillor Fire, some question.
Just think that project also includes lighting for project. Yes.
Okay, anybody else have anything that, go ahead.
Are we happy with multiple sale idea?
Well, I guess we have to look at the,
Well, I
Yeah,
know we take it out intended.
Yeah,
He's
I
kind of
don't-
asking us for an option today on the sales.
it depends on how many sales we've got, 1, and then 2. And then number 4 has 3 sales, and then the number 3 has several. So my assumption is that because of the photos needed and the number of sales, that might increase the cost of that project. That would be a little more expensive than the others. So if that's gonna be too expensive, do we have a plan B?
We don't just have to go up to 8, but I think we want more than 1. Is that on your phone?
Does that
Oh, it's
help?
clear.
So through the chair, Councillor King, again, we're looking for direction from the committee in regards to what we would like to see. What we can do is within the RFP process is put in options for reducing the amount of sales, if costs become a concern. So there are options in that regard, but if council wants to see the large encompassing sales and additional sales to provide more shade within the plaza, then that is the direction we will take. Those are the signs we'll move forward with options to pull back should budget become an issue.
Okay, well, it looks like 2 people, and I don't have a total preference, but I could go with option 3 as well, or 4. Maybe we look at that, and if there is a concern and it's going to be too expensive, could we have that put into the RFP, that we look at reducing the number of sales or making some of them a little bigger and having less? I don't know whether that makes a difference or not.
So your worship, if the committee is favoring option 3 as presented, that is the option we will go with the final design. And then we will look at cost negotiation. We want to reduce the number of sales, and that will be brought back to council as part of the RFP award.
Councilor Banner, we're here, what do you-
I suggest that the ultimate design is probably going to be accommodating of a few of these.
Okay.
We'll explore it. You don't have the information in front of you to say this one's best because this one provides 50% more shades than this design. And we don't have that information yet. We will get that. I have a sense the final design will be something similar to a larger sale to create a larger amount of space in the front area of the plaza, where we know we're going to focus some furnishings, with potentially some smaller sales as budget permits to create more space or more shade and more space.
Wouldn't it be better to have smaller sales over our picnic tables, depending on where the furniture is placed? Whether it can accommodate the sales, I mean, if you put one big one at the front. Hopefully there's 2 picnic tables under it, and might only fit 1, and then there's no shade over the other ones. So
The
again,
challenge even with shade sales is that our sun keeps moving. So there is a finite place depending on how large and how high the shade sale
it'd
is.
be pretty high to cover that half a street.
Yeah, so
We can have,
you know, in the future, with the amount of trees we planted here, we should achieve a very nice shade canopy along both sides. But again, we have to.
well, the way you go trees you want to plant.
And all of the furniture will be bolted down like it is now, am I correct? So it won't be movable in case somebody, okay, so they have to deal with that too. If a concert or something comes in, they have to, okay. All right, well, thank you very much. We appreciate,
So you can turn it up. I just want to make sure there's nothing else the committee would like to see included within this scope. We identified all your concerns moving forward. So again, that these final designs can be prepared and issued. I just don't want to come back at, at time of RFP award and you guys will wait a second, we want this and that. So it's a little bit more thought into if there's any potential future
I guess looking at some of the options here with the tree, I think we support the Christmas tree. I don't know about that big mister with all the rocks, sounds overpriced for what our budget is.
Yeah.
And then the real comment is like you're showing a ping pong table. And I don't really know how that fits in there. Because a ping pong table, if they're really playing, they go back 6-8 feet on each side. So you're gonna take up a major area with ping pong. I don't really support that idea personally. I think your mister, your bike station, I think they're great ideas, the water fountain, great idea. But those are a couple of things
Yeah, and I'll touch on that because I know the basketball was removed.
yeah, for sure.
We've done it in multiple parts where we've actually included a basketball net as a very informal activity. So it's not meant that this is a formalized sport court. It's more if a kid happens to be coming along with the ball, he can shoot a couple of hoops. So no line painting even potentially on the ground surface. And it goes in line with the ping pong table, and it's all about animating the space for multiple users. So that there's always something, the potential of something to be happening in the space. But I get it, it's not a big space, and the ping pong table
It
does
showed.
takes up the land, yeah, it shows.
And I guess if we're looking for any events down there and it's kind of a stage setting at one end,
Yeah,
I don't really see it fitting personally, but I guess we'll wait for the drawing.
I agree with that as well. I think that that's probably a little much to put in down there. However, I do remember BMO talking about putting in was it a chess or a checkers table down there?
From
Well, yeah, and I'm wondering if that has, and they were going to pay for it. And I wasn't sure whether that was part of the plan to talk to them about that. Okay.
not to my knowledge, no.
Mr. Davis, do you remember that there was it was a couple years ago, wasn't it? But you know what, if there is an option to put something like that in and they were gonna pay for it, I mean, we could ask them, but I don't wanna interfere with what was already planned.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess to me, the ping pong and basketball is kind of a pedestrian sit down park for people to visit, ping pong, bouncing basketballs. To me, it doesn't go together.
Yeah.
Because in the bigger park where the basketball right over there, maybe, but in a little half a block area.
Yeah.
Somebody playing ping pong just doesn't.
No, okay, we can remove that. We can actually look at furnishings to see if the furnishing line that the city's already, or the town's already bought, comes with, that's for a top option.
We used to have one up at Plaza and Penticton indoors at the mall.
Yeah,
You paint the squares and then the chessmen and anybody could play it like they're 2 feet high.
yeah. They're a standard catalog item.
Yeah,
Now, I just don't know if they'll be the same style as what's already been purchased for this, right?
Well, thank you very much for presenting this, and if any of us have any brilliant ideas in the middle of the night, we will be sure to talk to the area.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
very
We appreciate it. Okay. Next is Brittany Tuttle from Urban Systems. Brittany, please come up and you bring all this stuff up. Thank you for coming and collating all the information that that we got at the free meeting, so thank you.
Thank you for having me. Yes, I think we've received quite a bit of information, so that's great. Thank you for having me again today. I'm here to talk about the zoning bylaw, Foreshore. Oh, thank you. Foreshore and like zoning bylaw and short-term rentals policy program recommendations that we've been working on for the last few months now. As you are aware, we recently completed the first round of public engagement. So today we're going to be talking about a number of things. I'm going to give you an overview of the engagement period that occurred in February and March. And then we're going to be diving into some of the feedback that we've heard from the community on each of the relevant topics for this project. So on the zoning bylaw, we're gonna talk to you about what we heard from the community about accessory dwelling units and parking and how we're proposing to move forward on those two items. Then we're going to talk about short-term rentals, what we heard from the community, and some direction that we are seeking from you on how to move forward on that topic. And then we will end off chatting about the Foreshore and Lake zoning bylaw, and there are a few different items there that we would like to provide some context to you on what we heard from the community, and then also seeking your direction on how we might want to move forward on those items. And then we'll just wrap it up with a quick overview of what we're doing next on this project. So I'll dive right in today to chat with you about the engagement. So as you may be aware, we have a website for this project. It's called Osoyoos zoningupdate.ca. And on that website, there is information about each of the three elements of the project that we are working on. And then also outlining for folks during the first stage of engagement, how they might be able to get involved. And included on the webpage was a link to a survey to fill out. And the survey was available from February 13th to March 13th. And we received a total of 263 responses, which we just wanted to commend the community for that high level of participation, because this is more than what we received for the OCP and the survey that came out then. So we were very pleasantly surprised to have such a high response rate for the survey. So who did we hear from in the survey? Most folks who participated are year-round residents of the site, so just over 64%. And then a good chunk, just over 19%, are seasonal residents of the community. And then in terms of the age of respondents, most folks are over the age of 55, with 53% of the respondents being over age 55. But you can see there we have almost 20% of folks between the ages of 35 and 44, and then almost 20% between the ages of 45 and 54, which is always great to see those younger individuals coming up to participate as well. So we were quite happy with the distribution of the numbers that we received. And so a reminder for you of what we did during that 1 month period. We had the survey going online, as I mentioned. We also had 2 in-person workshops at the Sonora Center. One of them on February 28th in the evening. We had over 40 folks come out to that. And then we had another in-person one a couple of weeks later on a Saturday afternoon, and we had almost 30 people come out to that one. And then in between those 2 in-person events, we had a virtual workshop on Zoom for those who might not be able to make it in person. We had 14 people attend that one. Okay, so now I'm going to get into what we heard on the specific topics about the zoning bylaw. First, we're going to talk about accessory dwelling units. So if council recalls back in January, when you would have seen me last, we talked about how we might wish to move forward with permitting detached accessory dwelling units in this way. So right now the zoning bylaw permits secondary basement suites, but it does not permit things like carriage and laneway homes. So we talked about, how might we wish to move forward with incorporating regulations to permit these uses in the zoning bylaw. And what we discussed with council was permitting carriage homes in the agricultural AG zone and the single family residential R1 zones of the town, so long as there is access to a lane in the rear and so long as 1 additional parking space is provided for that carriage home. So we went to the community and said, hey community, these are the things we're thinking about doing. Are you in support of this? And 71% said yes, they are. They think it's a great idea. So that was really good to hear. There were a couple of concerns that came up in relation to parking. Some people thought that 1 additional parking space on the lot might not be enough because of some of the challenges that the community currently faces with on-street parking right now. And then another concern came up about the relationship between permitting carriage homes, laneway homes, and short-term rentals. Some folks were concerned that if we have carriage homes now permitted, that we're going to have more short-term rentals in the community and those being operated in those carriage homes. So both valid concerns that we heard. And then what we are proposing to do moving forward based on this feedback. So on this map here, shows in green all of the agricultural AG1 zone properties in Osoyoos. And then in the pinky color is all of the single family residential R1 zone properties in Osoyoos. And what we're proposing to do moving forward for the detached carriage homes in Osoyoos is permitting these in these zones where parcels have access to a rear lane, or they meet a minimum lot size and width requirement so that you can still access the carriage home from the front of the property. And we have been in discussions with fire about this, and this is something that they mentioned that they can support so long as the minimum parcel size allows them to have that rear access to the property. In addition, fire indicated that they would also like to see the carriage home set back a minimum distance from the principal dwelling. So that's something that we're looking into and proposing to do moving forward, as well as providing a pathway from the front of the property to the rear so that you can access it easily by a path. And we're looking at what a minimum width of that pathway might be appropriate to address these potential concerns associated with access. And then, as we were already proposing, to provide one additional parking space for the accessory dwelling unit on the property. So that is the first piece related to the zoning bylaw that we wanted to bring to your attention today. The second one is about parking. So if you recall this figure that exists in the zoning bylaw, it identifies downtown as an area in the zoning bylaw to which there are different parking requirements for things like apartment buildings and other types of multifamily residential development. So right now in the zoning bylaw, if you're within that red boundary of this map, you are required to provide one space per dwelling unit if you're going to build something like an apartment. But if you are building outside of that boundary, you are allowed to provide 1.75 parking spaces per dwelling unit. So if you recall, when we discussed in January, there were some concerns that parking requirement for downtown may not be enough, especially because visitor parking seems to be a problem. Lots of folks are parking on the street. So we went to the community and said, do you support us increasing that parking standard within the downtown boundary? And 57% did support that. So we are proposing a few different recommendations related to parking to address these concerns relate in terms of shortage of parking downtown and other places across the community. The first one being that we want to assign new parking standards to multiple unit or multifamily residential development based on the number of bedrooms. So we're thinking if you have one bedroom apartment or other type of multifamily residential development, you'll be required to provide 1.5 spaces per dwelling unit instead of 1 or 1.75, which is the current requirement. And then if you have a 2-bedroom unit, then you need to provide 2 spaces per dwelling unit. And that just accounts for the fact that if you have more than one person living in the home in Osoyoos, usually there's 2 cars. And sometimes that's the case if you have 1 bedroom. Some folks may have 2 cars, some folks may have 1, some may have none. So we think that this might be a healthy balance to address those parking related concerns for new multifamily development. The other thing that we're looking at doing is requiring visitor parking requirements, because right now the zoning bylaw actually doesn't require any. And so we hope that for new development, this having a visitor parking requirement will help to resolve some of those problems we have with overflow parking onto the street. So there's a few different types of examples of what other communities are doing. One of them is requiring a fraction of number of spaces per dwelling unit or a percentage number. And so common ones that we've seen are 5% of the parking spaces must be used for visitor parking, or 0.2 spaces per dwelling unit need to be assigned for visitor parking. So those are some things that we are exploring what may work best in the context of the Osoyoos. And then the last thing is that we're proposing to get rid of this figure so that this multifamily residential parking requirement will apply to all of Osoyoos, not just the downtown. So just having those rates there, the 1 bedroom, 1.5 spaces, 2 bedroom, 2 spaces will apply to the whole town, not just to downtown. And the last thing that we are looking at in terms of parking is the cash and lieu rate of parking. So right now in the zoning bylaw, there's a requirement, if you do not meet your parking standard, you're required to provide $3,000 cash in lieu per parking space. And this rate is actually quite low. So we are looking to you, council, to provide some direction on if we can increase this number. I provided on the board here some other examples of other communities and what terms of what they're providing. So PETITIONS is requiring $6,000 cash in lieu. Oliver is $8,000, Nelson's $10,000, Penticton is $13,000, and Kelowna is $33,000. So we're probably not quite as high as Kelowna, but we can definitely increase this number.
Are you okay?
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just I'm not sure if this is to Apple or the planning department, but I always wondered that when we have the apartment block downtown and they build it in lieu of getting parking, they say, oh, we'll give you $3,000 per spot. And we get, say, 30,000 for 10 units. That 30,000, we don't take that and put into a kitty to buy some property, provide parking somewhere else down the road. So if it was, say, 10,000, then maybe that would make sense, then we'd be getting 100,000, and that could go towards a parking lot. I'm just not sure where that money, if it just goes back in general funds, or do we take that new cash into parking and put it towards parking somewhere else?
So ultimately, through the chair, the funds have gone into a reserve fund before. They were utilized for the purchase of the lot, 2 lots in town over the last 15 years. So there hasn't been any monies coming in since that point in time, but definitely it's something where we would set that money aside for that purpose.
Go ahead, Ms. Beckett.
Thank you, Mayor McGrath. I just wanted to clarify that when we are, since I came this position, taking funds in lieu of parking, we don't do it for the residential units. So a good example is the mixed use development proposal across from Nesters. Remember we looked at that development permit? They had the required number of parking stalls for the residential portion. They were short on the required number of stalls for the commercial portion. So we only would accept cash in lieu for that. And just to give you a better understanding about numbers, I did speak to a couple different architects about the cost of construction for parking, and they recommend something around $20,000 per parking stall for surface parking, and around 30 to 40,000 for parkade parking. So that gives you a better sense of what it's actually going to cost to build some of this parking. So again, that doesn't necessarily equate to what it would cost for the land purchase, but it gives you a better sense of what the valuation is of a parking stall.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we can't really make a decision here, but can we get a motion for staff to come back and report about increasing this parking movement?
Yes, we could certainly do that again through the chair, or alternatively, when we come forward with the draft bylaw, we could provide additional rationale on some of the recommendations.
Whatever works for you.
Yeah. Thank you. Go ahead.
I just, there was a period of time where we did charge a higher parking rate and then dropped to the 3,000, is that correct?
I believe so, yes, I think it was 7,500 before.
It was a different house.
I just know it caused, yeah, there was a few projects that stalled based on that value.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
any
Go
other
ahead.
questions about parking or?
Well,
If
it's
that's your
something
question.
we're concerned about.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next topic of short-term rentals, which I guess I probably might spend some more time here. So if you recall, in January, we discussed about implementing a pilot program, or proposing a short-term rentals pilot program to the community. And so the details of that program were, the town was going to explore regulated short-term rentals for about 2 to 3 years. You could have a short-term rental in your principal dwelling unit, so in your single detached home. Or you can have it in your secondary suite or basement suite, or in a carriage home if we decided to move forward with carriage homes. But only one short-term rental per parcel. You would be required to provide proof of insurance and a business license, as well as having an inspection facilitated by the town. So those were, and then also one additional parking space on site for the short-term rental. So those were the criteria that we took to the community. And we asked them if the town was to implement a short-term rental pilot program that looks like this, would you support this program? And unsurprisingly, we were a little bit divided in the results. So 50% were in support, 42% opposed, and 8% were neutral. And so we looked at the comments that we received from those folks who were not in support, as well as those who were neutral. And even among some of those who were in support, they demonstrated similar comments. The top one, parking was a concern, of course. But that seemed a little bit unsurprising, so I didn't include it on the slide. But the ones that I thought would be interesting to bring forth to you or to highlight for you was there was quite a bit of concern about the negative impact of short-term rentals on the long-term housing supply in Osoyoos, and as well as the town's ability to actually enforce this type of program. And so today, what we want to highlight for you to potentially reconsider what are the pilot program criteria that we initially proposed, and to talk about all of the possible options of what you might want to include in a short-term rental program. So over the next, how many slides here? 10 slides, I'm going to give you all of the potential options for what we could include in a short-term rental program. And then you can decide if you want to keep what we chatted about before, potentially revise it. And I'm going to highlight the benefits and the potential risks or implications associated with each one, so you're aware, because we didn't quite dive into this last time. So the first one is requiring a permit for operation. So this is one that we had decided on last time, and so there are some benefits associated with that. It's ensuring that the short-term rental is being reviewed by staff, so it's compliant with all of the codes, bylaws, policies that are relevant to the new unit. It also provides you with a record, so you know how many units are legally in operation at any point in time, and you know who is operating it if you need to contact the owner. And then yes, you also are able to easier track the number of short-term rentals that are in operation at any given time. This is going to be a common risk or implication that you'll notice throughout all of these options is how you're actually going to monitor the illegal short-term rentals. So there are software programs like Granicus and Hamari, and I know that you've been considering Granicus that can help with that. And then the province too, I should highlight for you as well. The provincial government recently announced a month ago that they're going to be bringing out some legislation in the fall to assist communities with enforcement of short-term rentals. So we don't know what the details of that is yet, but wanted to highlight that for you as well. And then the other thing too here is if there is a fine, how are we going to enforce the fines for illegal operation? So the second criteria to consider is restricting where we're going to have short-term rentals in the community. If we only want them in certain neighborhoods, only on particular zones. So if we restrict them to certain areas, sometimes that could be easier if you have a conglomerate of them all in 1 or 2 spaces. They're not spread out. But in terms of risks and implications, you know, there's probably going to be lots of people who want to have them elsewhere, and they will still do that. So how are you going to monitor and enforce that? And then also if you have them all permitted in just one or two areas of the community, you could have more traffic, less on-street parking if people are not providing the correct number of parking spaces. There could be more noise, and fewer long-term housing options in that area or areas. Next one is permitting the short-term rental in an accessory or principal dwelling unit only. So if there's more than one unit on the property, just permitting it in one of them. So the benefits of this is that it ensures the entire property is not going to be used for short-term rentals. It also allows us to consider the lot sizing and parking requirements and infrastructure servicing levels that might be necessary to accommodate that short-term rental. But again, if there's an illegal short-term rental added to the property after the permit has been approved, then how are we going to know that? How will we enforce that? And then if the required number of parking spaces is insufficient if they haven't met their parking requirement after they've submitted a permit and added another unit illegally. The fourth one is requiring the owner of the property or a designated property manager of some sort to be present on the property at all times. This is one that a lot of communities are doing. And it does address, it potentially could address some common concerns associated with nuisance, noise, and parking. However, it is more of a paper exercise. You indicate on paper that you're going to be there, but then maybe you disappear or you decide to move to another community and still operate your short-term rental, or you go on vacation, etc. How are we going to enforce whether someone is actually there or not? Another one that we're seeing is capping the number of guests that are permitted on the property. So the number of people that are staying in the short-term rental, we are thinking that as a regulation as well. And so some communities like this because it addresses, or appears to address their concerns associated with partying, from having larger Airbnbs or short-term rentals. And then parking too, if there's a number of people staying in a short-term rental, then there could be more than one vehicle on the property. But again, how do we enforce the number of guests that are on the site? Next one is proof of insurance, and this is one that we had talked about. It is very common to see this one as a requirement when you're getting your business license checked for short-term rental. So this ensures addresses quite a few health and safety concerns. If there's ever an emergency or incident, then you know that things should be okay. And then again, if you're requiring insurance, then it allows you to know that property is operating a short-term rental. So there's benefits to that. But if there's illegal SDRs, we're not going to have this information. So that's always the risk or the implication. The next one is requiring an inspection prior to actually operating these units. So there's some benefits associated with this to make sure everything's in compliance. So there addresses some health and safety concerns, and it ensures that the unit is constructed in accordance with fire and building codes. So something that we talked about among staff when we were talking about this requirement is that inspections need to be conducted by a building inspector. So that could put quite a bit of extra strain and time and energy required onto your building inspector. And in addition, we actually can't require to have conducting an annual inspection. So let's say someone has a short-term rental, they come in next year, they want to renew their permit. We actually can't require an inspection for that because it doesn't have to do with the building code check. So that is something if you can only do one time, you can only do an initial issuance of the permit and not later on. So that's something to consider. And then again, if there's illegal short-term rentals, then they're not going to be getting inspected. So that's the continued comment that I have on that side of risks. The next one is limiting the number of consecutive nights that the short-term rental could be in operation by one particular party. So let's say it would you can only have one party of guests staying for 7 nights, for example. And so that addresses some concerns related to noise, again, parking, partying, etc. This is a more or less common one that we're seeing in other communities, because again, it's kind of difficult to enforce that one. But it is an option. Okay, we have three more. So this one here is requiring neighborhood notification for short-term rental operations. So when someone would come in for their permit or inspection, you could send out a notification to property owners within a certain distance of the property. And so this could address some concerns that the community might have about the operation of a short-term rental in their neighborhood. And it also allows folks to be aware that there is a short-term rental operating in their neighborhood. Again, if there's an illegal short-term rental, they're not going to be going through this process. And there could end up being quite a few inquiries that staff receive if we were to do something like this, and that would be putting more time and energy onto staff, and they're already limited capacity to address those concerns and inquiries. So we're requiring an additional parking space for the short-term rental. This is something that we had already proposed to include in the pilot program. So this would address some of the concerns associated with parking overflowing into the street. Is the biggest one there. And some implications though is if there is a large short-term rental with multiple bedrooms that are being rented out at any given time, and you're only requiring one extra parking space. One parking space might not be enough if you have multiple different parties staying in your short-term rental at any given time. Let's say you have 3 bedrooms that you're renting out, then they have 3 different guests, three more cars where they're gonna park. So that's something we might need to think about on the parking front. And then again, if there's illegal short-term rentals in operation, they might not be actually providing any additional parking at all. And then the last one is limiting the short-term rental operation to a number of days per year or a time of year. So we're seeing this in some communities where they're saying you can't have your short-term rental in operation for any more than 4 months of the year, let's say, or 6 months of the year. So that is something that you could consider. They also have been limiting, I think I provide this as an option, like 1 rental to 7-day period or a 14-day period. So that's something that could be considered. So if we wanted to limit to, let's say, like 6 months per year or 4 months of the year, that could potentially address some of the concerns about housing supply. Because you could have that unit could be rented out for longer term housing at other times of the year that's not used for a short-term rental, assuming that it occurred, let's say like June, July, August, it's a short-term rental, and then September to May, it's used for longer term housing. But again, it's still taking away from the housing stock too. And then another benefit is it would limit nuisances to a certain time of year only, but then at the same time, you could have a bunch of nuisance occurring just in the summer, so that's not great either, right? So those are, maybe before I get into the piece, I'll ask if there's any questions about all of that, because it's quite a bit of information there.
Can I ask, do you have any idea what the province, what their thoughts are? Because you said they're coming out with some strategies, some plans in the fall. Do we have any idea what? No. So it could be totally different than the concerns that we have, or?
Thank you again to the chair, Mayor McCarroll. What they've expressed to us so far and was brought up at the UBCM Housing Summit is that they're working on some ideas on how to provide some assistance. They haven't specifically stated whether that is assistance in helping to monitor or, but that is more information to follow.
So the other thing is that at the regional district board, people will come in and apply for a TUP, temporary use permit. That's a little different than this, and it's always, they have to pay, and then it can go for 1 year, and then they have to come back, or, you know, could be multiple different ways. Is that different than?
Yes.
Yeah.
So just for clarity, temporary use permit would apply for the number of years specified in that permit. To a maximum of 3 years, for example. The benefits of a temporary use permit are very, you have to go through a very specific process. It's very public. The neighbors get to comment on every single one that comes forward. The disadvantages are it's very time consuming. It's administrative, a lot of administrative time. So again, there's benefits of every different type of process, and there's challenges, I would say. A short-term rental program we would spell out all the different criteria that you have to meet for whatever type of short-term rental program you're getting.
So at the regional district table, it's usually just the area directors that can vote on TUPs. So it doesn't concern municipal directors. So it's interesting to listen to, but it's not something that we've had to get involved with. Well, you certainly got lots of information on short-term rentals. Yeah, well, on this particular, and so, go ahead with the options and what you think we should do next, for sure.
Well, so this is why we're kind of turning to you now, is because we could proceed with what we had originally proposed already, which was the 1 parking space, the insurance requirement, and the inspection. And we could bring that back again to the public in June when we have another workshop to talk to them and maybe dive into what their concerns are a bit more and how we might be able to address this. We could stick with that, or we could swap out some of those options to include any of these other ones that I just went over. Or we could just completely start from scratch and do something different. So that's part of why we're here today, see your input on it, if you would like to change any of those things.
Go ahead, Councilor Banner.
I guess my biggest thing when I go through this comes down to that one sentence, how do you monitor and enforce? So we can pick whatever we want to go through these, but until we can figure out how we can monitor that and enforce it, it's just like it is now. When we were at Soga, this was brought up again, and everybody talks about it. No one knows how to monitor. And that's why they went to government, like Soga, the Southern Interior Area Association, and said, what do we do?
Yeah.
And the government's supposed to be telling us some, but.
We don't know what yet.
Right, and thank you again, Mayor McGrath. So you'll recall, and new councillors will not recall this, but returning councillors will recall that we did have a presentation by Granicus, which Brittany also mentioned. And we probably would have to look at outside help to help us implement the program, monitor the program. Unfortunately, enforcement of the program would still fall back to the municipality. And that has implications on, the strain on our current bylaw services staff and finance staff. Anybody else?
I can tell you right now that enforcement is quite cumbersome. We really do rely on neighbors, unfortunately, to provide the proof that there is short-term rentals happening on the property. And then it's cumbersome to, the municipality has to deliver notice, and many of the property owners unfortunately do not live in the community, so we need to find third parties to deliver the NTIs to the property owners. And we do rely on our legal, in part that we have applied for injunctions to stop those prolific short-term rental properties. So it is something that we are working on, but it is very timely to make sure that you have the proof. And unfortunately, it does require help from the neighbors to provide that proof of the short term.
And also the cost of going through the procedure and contacting the lawyers and that type of thing. Totally get it.
Right, and so I would just, thank you so much, Mrs. Tilton. So I would just add that as part of if you had a program in place, you might cut down on the number of complaints, because, you could conceivably have a permit that's displayed in the window. So people would know, oh, okay, there's a short-term rental there, well, they have a permit. It's a regulation is, you're never gonna get rid of them. So,
And what some other communities are doing as an initial starting point is they're also doing pilot programs and they're starting with sort of the very basic regulations such as those that we discussed a few months ago and brought forward to the community, and then they're reassessing in a couple of years and deciding like, okay, this is what we learned in these last couple of years, this is working well, this isn't, do we want to add something, do we want to take something away, do we want to change something? And that seems to be the common approach that we're seeing.
So starting with a program and then having a look at it. Yeah, no, I think it makes sense. We have to do something.
Mayor, have those programs just starting now? Or have they been enforced for a couple of years that we could use their information to go back and say, this has worked there and this hasn't worked, you know?
Yeah, so
Piggyback on some of
a
that?
lot of the bigger communities have been in play for a few years now, like Pomona. Has been in play for a few years, and obviously they have much more power than the town does. But West Pomona, for example, just implemented their program last year, and they're actually bringing forth a report to council today to tell. I have a colleague who works there in bylaw enforcement, and they're bringing forth their recommendation or their report to council today to say this is what's been working well, and we want to continue forward with doing these in the next year, have another update and see if we need to change anything. So it's been 1 year for them, and they have done very similar regulations to what we proposed.
So wouldn't that be a good thing for us to hear what happened with them and before we do anything here?
Yeah. Yeah, so for them, their meeting is happening today. It's just a report to council. They're not asking for any decisions to be made because it is working well for them.
Then we'll get hold of the report.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so then the next thing that we want to chat about with you today is if we're going to implement this program, then we will need some sort of permit fee associated with it. And so there are different options for permit fees. You can apply this the standard fee. It doesn't matter what type of short-term rental you have, or you can apply different fees depending on what types of short-term rentals you have. So some communities have a different fee for if you're operating in the home versus if you're operating in the basement suite or the laneway house. So they have two different fees for that. Some of them have different fees based on how many days of the year you're operating your short-term rental. So if you're operating it for maybe only 30 days in the year, it's a lesser fee than if you're operating it for 6 months of the year, let's say. And some of them also have different fees depending on how many guests can stay in a home. So let's say you have multiple bedrooms that you're renting out, or it's a very large home, then you might apply a higher fee for that than if you're just renting a room, let's say. And the fees that we have seen range anywhere from $250 to $900 a year per permit that you have. So this is something that we would like you to consider as well.
So if you put it on too high a price, then people are probably going to try and get around it. Is that's one of the issues?
Yeah, there's a balance for sure, because you want to be able to allow you want to encourage people to get on board with the program, but that's exactly it. If it's too high, then they'll just continue to operate in the week.
Go ahead, Councilor.
Does the permit sort of cover a one bedroom house? Is it the same price for a 3-bedroom house?
So it depends on if you are, so some communities differentiate, some don't. They just apply one fee, doesn't matter what type of short-term rental you have, this is the fee. And some say, okay, if you're renting out 1 bedroom in your house only, then this is your fee. But if you're renting out your whole house and it has 3 bedrooms, then you have a higher fee than if you're just renting out 1 bedroom.
Maybe stipulate the owner has to be in the house, you can't run them all in.
Unless they're living in the basement.
You can't micromanage the amount of people.
No, exactly.
Mayor McCormick, I was just thinking that maybe it might be helpful to bring back to committee the whole a report after further discussion with urban systems staff and also the director's team on some options that we could spell out in a report to committee of the whole on this subject. If that is something that
For
council
sure.
wishes, because it's a lot of information.
Yes. And so you do have, you have set up a meeting on Saturday, June the 10th, but that's for the public.
That's correct.
Yeah. So are you thinking before that date, have a meeting with, and I'm not sure whether we can fit that in or not, I don't know.
I'm gonna ask Theo Risen for his thoughts on that.
Through your worship, I guess, if there are several options, and we can go multitude of ways, so I mean, it would really, I think, assist in knowing, somebody that is completely off the table. Because there's so many, like, differing viewpoints, like, I might be in favor of it completely, but maybe I'm gonna start renting mine out, or whatever it is, and there's pros and cons. I don't think there's ever a silver bullet in any of this, but.
Not really, it really depends on the community and what your objectives are.
So, I mean. So I wouldn't mind hearing something. I don't think I've heard anything on the short-term rental as far as. The water council is feeling some type of. Comfort. As far as where we're going.
Go ahead, Councillor King.
Well, I guess if you go back through the 11 or comments, I think number one is a good idea that we have codes, bylaw, policies. That would be, I would support that. The pilot project is doing it in a certain area. I think that's makes sense because of shortage of staff to really do anything. To me, it wouldn't matter whether it's in the house or accessory building because we haven't passed that yet anyhow. To have the owner in the building, I mean, I know when I went to the open houses, that seemed very important that they could contact somebody specifically. So I'd probably like to see that. A maximum amount of gas, I don't think you can micromanage that personally. I think proof of insurance would be important. Inspection, I guess you'd have to do the first one if you put in the bylaws, would have to do number 7. Limited nights, I don't think you can micromanage that personally, it doesn't make any sense. Required neighborhood notification. I think that's just gonna create a whole bunch of complaints if you got a neighbor that doesn't like it personally. I think it's important to make sure we have parking for the size of rooms there is, or the amount of rooms. And I think the limited to 5 or 6 months of the year would make sense, but we even open up those facilities in the winter for longer term rentals. That's my recommendations.
Okay, would you like to?
I'll try and narrow it down.
Okay, go ahead, yeah.
Your worship. Okay, my lead one's obviously the permitting, parking, the inspection side of it. I think, again, you're gonna run into some issues if you start trying to enforce the date side of it. I do like when we start getting discussion of the fee side is maybe that tiered approach. I don't think it does a minor, sorry, they do a minor, major, so minor is it's the one-offs, majors, they're regular, and then they have a major, the high occupancy, so call it the party crowd, we'll call that maybe that 6+ tenants, where it's a higher, the requirements are a lot different than if it was the one-off, and if the bedroom suite or accessory building, but I think if I can narrow that down, I think those are kind of the key ones for me.
Okay. Are you?
I guess my big thing is that, probably 5% of the people that are creating the problem, but 5%, the other 95%, like I know some people where I live are renting their place out all the time. They live in the cities, they go check and they drive by all the time and they look after it. So that's good. There's other people that don't live in the community that don't care. And it's those people that don't live here that have a 5-bedroom, and that's the party houses. So that's the concern, is that how do we stop that 10%? We're gonna spend 90% of our time trying to stop that 10% again. Is a bylaw gonna do it? I don't know. that's one of them here.
They're doing a lot of it right now, aren't they? That's a big job for bylaw right now. I think, do you already understand? Okay, so I think, a permit is a good idea. And I think it makes people think about what they're doing. And I'm not sure that restricting it to certain areas, although. Yeah, that isn't as high a priority for me. And I do think that it should be in the principal dwelling. Only or basement. Not sure about accessory dwelling, but. I think that requiring the owner or designate to be present. Was one of the things that I heard at the meetings that we were at, that was a really. Important thing, they would take better care of it, however, I agree about enforcing. Proof of insurance, I think, and having an inspection. To me, those are important as well, and parking is, to me, is a huge issue. For all of those things, so I really, yeah, those are the ones that I would, oh, Brianne's got it over, yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say again, there are two other areas I think we should be very cautious about, and that is multifamily residentials. I think that's a no. And the intensive residential zones like the Metal Arc area, because that's already a challenge in that area with parking and traffic.
And I didn't, absolutely, I think those are very important as well, and I don't think that if you don't have enough room and you don't have enough parking, then, you shouldn't be doing it. Yeah,
Well, in the intensive residential zone right now, you're not permitted to have a secondary suite unless specified in the development permit.
okay, yeah. No,
So that's
I
another
agree with you
challenge.
that there are some areas in town that obviously couldn't have. An accessory or, short-term rental because they don't have. They don't have enough room to have parking and to have, yeah, no, I agree, totally. Sorry, I didn't want to, exclude that one.
We have enough information to come back with,
Yeah, so just to reiterate back what
Sure.
was heard, so we're in support of having a permit. We're in support of restricting to potentially just the principal dwelling unit, maybe a basement suite, maybe, but probably not a carriage home. We're in support of requiring the owner to be present. We are also in support of requiring insurance to be approved and an inspection. We also would like to see one parking space at least provided, as well as potentially limiting the operations to do a certain time of year or a certain number of days per year.
Yeah, that's,
Okay.
and the fee structure.
And the fee structure, we're considering doing like a minor versus major type thing by how many rooms you're renting out.
that, go ahead. Drafting.
I don't mean to interrupt your worship. One thing that the committee should look at and council as a whole is the cost associated with implementing these types of programs.
Yes.
You realize you're getting a fee structure you're gonna develop. Now, does council want this to be a cost neutral system? Do you want general revenue to subsidize this? And then the potential for FTEs you're going to need to enforce. So if there's something else to put in your mind as you're going through this process.
I think, costs on everything are obviously have to be included, but. Yeah, great.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
Let's see if that-
Okay, we're gonna move on to the next topic. Equally exciting, as the Foreshore on bylaw. Yeah, please feel free to jump in at any point in time on this one.
Can I just jump in right away on this one, because I did notice that it does say existing entities now. Council members who have been around for a while will recall that this was a challenge area, and that is Jasmine Drive or Acacia Court area. These are considered semi-waterfront properties, and in the Foreshore Lake zoning bylaw right now, there's a section that gives it site-specific conditions of use. That people that have these semi-waterfront parcels can apply for the town for the installation of docks or boat lifts on private buoys. But they're actually not permitted under our current foreshore lease that we have with the province, which specifically states that we're not allowed to let anyone put anything in or on the foreshore of any of those areas where we have the foreshore leases. So we're in non-compliance of our own agreement with the province. So if you just go to the next slide, we did talk about a couple of possible options, and one of the options would be to actually obtain a head lease for that area and then charge back to that cost of the head lease to the property owners. That is an option. Building a dock for the owners and possibly others in the area and require payment for the construction and maintenance of the facility, so that it's a joint dock owned by the town, but space is leased or owned, rented out to property owners in there, or just have all the docks and buoys removed and have them comply with the actual foreshore lease. So these are all very complicated situations, and they're helping us to contribute to the conversation about a buoy lease program. So let's just keep going on to the couple of the other hot areas. Oasis is another hot area, and they have private buoys and swimming docks in the public beach area. They actually have a sign on that boat launch, which is actually town-owned property. It's actually not owned by Oasis. They're also all contrary to the foreshore lease that we have, again, with the province for this area. Again, we could notify them of the unauthorized activity, and we could request that in this particular case, that the resort install buoys and or a docking system in front of their own private property, because they do actually own foreshore property in that case. And then the third area of concern is actually Walton's, which is just Walton's Resort, which is north of Oasis. Again, there's a proliferation of buoys in the area in front of Walton's and the foreshore. That is also the town's, and again, it's non-compliant with our provincial agreement to use the foreshore. Again, this is an area where we might be able to implement a buoy lease program in the future, way down the road, but there's complications with that as well, which we'll get to. We could also just increase the swim grid area there to get some of the boats out of the swimming area, further out of the swimming area, because we do have a swim grid there. I'm not sure if it's installed by us. I think that actually Walton's puts it in. Pardon me. Maybe just go to the next slide. Oh, okay, so let's just pause here.
Yes.
So again, we could notify them of the illegal activity, but it's very difficult to have all the buoys removed in one area of town only. Again, if we expanded the swim grid area here in the future, obviously that's another cost that we haven't allocated for. But if we increase the swim grid area, that would naturally push the buoys at least further out to separate the buoys and the swimmers. So
what happens to
Where they
buoys that are put in front of, and I know there are a few around town, that people put out their own buoy in front of private property? Is that allowed? How does that?
well, the private property owners tend to regulate that themselves very quickly. If they see somebody else put a buoy out. But we're the ones that.
What do they do? They go and move it, or they ask?
Or they advise them they have to move it,
Okay.
or it moves at night, things happen at night.
Okay, go ahead.
But that's private property.
I guess I'd just like to sort of talk one at a time. I know there's the bigger picture. But on this, you just started with the Jasmine Acadia Court private. Has there been any discussion? I know they're not in compliance with our lease, but has there been any talk with them about at the obtaining a head lease and charging back to the property owners?
Okay, so when I first arrived, I had many people come into my office and ask about this, how they get this permit from the town. And because it is identified in the Foreshore Lake zoning bylaw. I did speak with the Crown about it, about the province, and they said we can't do it under our current lease we have. We would have to go to a head lease process. I think that there would be an appetite from property owners along there, but I think you also need to look at the bigger picture. Is this, the use of the foreshore in that particular area is historical, which is why that area was put into this special condition in the bylaw, but there's other areas in the community basically that kind of function the same way.
I guess I'm just reading the one at a time, so you're telling me our bylaw has to be updated or changed. Because it's not in compliance with the lease we have.
The bylaw says that they can apply for a permit, but there is no way for
You're right.
them to get a permit, so
As I
you're
said,
correct.
that bylaw has to be updated or changed.
Correct, and if the bylaw was updated to say that you couldn't put anything in the foreshore, then all of those people would have to remove their infrastructure.
And I'm just trying to deal one at a time and take small chunks and get
Yeah.
to the end over the next 3 to 5 years. And I get to go down to Oasis Resort.
Hang on, can we?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry.
we're still on Jasmine and Aisha Court.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. What's a head lease versus a lease?
Oh, sure, okay, so a head lease is basically the kind of lease that we have with the province for the area in Gyro Park over the foreshore there to allow the Wibbit to operate. So you'll recall, we entered into the foreshore lease with the province. We pay a certain amount to maintain that lease, and then we recoup the funds of the cost of that head lease, and I believe a little bit more to help administer the program at our end. And Director Davis can speak more to this. But what we do is we recoup that funds for the foreshore lease from the persons that operate the Wibbit.
So on Jasmine Port, the people that are there now, if you did a head lease, they'd still be allowed to have the docks, but it'd be under a head lease.
So what would happen, that's a very good question, thank you, Councillor Bennett. So what would happen is the Crown would assess the value of what that use of the foreshore is for that private individual. And they would base the cost of the head lease on what they value the use of that foreshore at. So basically, they would say, okay, well, we can see that those people should be paying about $2,000 a year or whatever it is to use that, have exclusive use over that foreshore that they don't own. So we're gonna charge you $20,000 for that head lease.
And that'd be for length of the lease or $20,000.
It's usually a year.
Here, okay, so that'd be like for 10 different people. And then somebody else moves in and buys a house and they wanna put a dock out there up in the lot. Who's allowed to use that head lease? Just those properties above?
Well, the way the bylaw is written right now is the properties immediately above that acacia trail. Are the ones that have their infrastructure in the foreshore.
That all comes with a kind of a live shade.
Correct.
So all those guys could put a dock in.
I'm not sure. Joe Riesling wants to speak to this at all.
Can I just ask that I mean, one of the options is to put a dock in there, but where do you put the dock? And it's not in front of Stone property, or, how would you figure out where to put that? And is that just there because has to be one of the options, or is it a viable option?
Well, every option has its challenges. but
Yeah.
yes, definitely. Not sure. I think- sorry.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. I just want to thank for council's consideration of the fact that we do have infrastructure in the foreshore there. So I do have the sanitary need that comes up and down that area. So accessibility for our maintenance needs, that's being considered when you guys start to look at leasing lands to private property, because as soon as you start to lease land to private property, they feel it's their property and they can do with it as they please. So just some of the considerations, particularly this particular area, that we do have infrastructure in the ground, but I need to be able to access and maintain. So
Weren't we at one point going to pave that walkway down there? And
yes, your worship,
That
that
would
is
be-
another project that is on the books. We were waiting for grant funding to proceed, but that is something that, again, you'll have to go into consideration when starting to look at Foreshore and leases along that strip. The fact that, you know, we were looking at putting in a multi-use path in to
Yes.
connect Osoyoos Park to the rest of the community.
so that would make a difference of what the owners there could use, right?
And there's foreshore issues, erosion issues along that entire stretch that we'd have to address as part of this. And just
There's a
making
lot
sure-
of water and seepage and through there too, because I walk on there quite often, so.
Yeah, and from what I understand, again, I'm looking into this too far, and it's something that will have to be put on the books eventually. It's a geotechnical investigation in regards to that upstream slope. There has been notes of pre-ditch and slippage of that slope, which could potentially impact the infrastructure, the town infrastructure, as well as development of water. So that one is a complicated site to
Yeah.
discuss.
Yes, it is. Okay.
Yeah, this is more likely quite an old picture we're looking at, because OIB actually extends their property quite a ways along that pathway. I presume if you get to paving there, you're gonna have to talk to OIB.
You mean
Susan
Parks
Event is
Canada?
is in favor of the trail, and they were consulted with before you put in the grant request.
This one, Doc, this is, it's an old picture, it's more likely actually been removed already, the one on the right.
That one is still there.
Is it? Okay.
It is a complicated issue, and I know it was a big, heavy topic of during the development of the Foreshore Lake zoning bylaw, and I wasn't here at that time, so.
And
I
I
can't
was
speak
on
too
that
much to it,
committee
but-
and I can remember that some of the people that were on the committee were actually owners down there and of course wanted things to be their way, and I don't think we ever resolved that issue, as I recall. Go ahead.
Madam Mayor, just one more question. So if there's 20 people on there. And 10 of them said they were willing to pay the money for the foreshore lease, then you put easement on there for the stuff going across, and they agreed to do that. Is that an option to go and say, I'm gonna go meet the owners? Here's what it is now, we're gonna have to change it. This is what it's gonna cost for each of the owners. And if only 5 eco, it's gonna cost this much, if 20 eco, it's gonna cost this much. And it's like a 5-year, 10-year lease. Is that an option, or are we just gonna say,
Good questions, Counselor Bennett. Basically, again, through the chair, what would happen is if we were gonna consider a head lease over the area, and it just, if you were gonna think about it. As an option, you would first go to the province to ask them what kind of money they'd be looking at. For that head lease over that area and for what purpose. A head lease for commercial purposes costs more than it does for recreation, but it's still there for private use. It's not like public recreation, it's just for something completely different. Which is why we have the leases we have, because it's for public use. You could possibly do that and then meet with those individual property owners. The question becomes, is that the right thing to do?
For your worship, I mean, this is not like their own. There's, I can guarantee a ton of other people that would love to have a dock, and we have a waiting list, for our. I don't know how long our waiting list is, I think it's pretty long, right? 30 people, so everybody wants a dock, and so to just consider, yeah, down this road to allow for those 5 or 6 people, why would we stop there and not look at the people further in? And there's all kinds of other liability issues, right? It is a big, it's a huge issue.
all the other options in town?
Well, there's different ones. Some people actually own up to the Foreshore. This one actually, the land in front of them, they don't own. Right, that is a big,
So we're
big
dealing
difference.
with, this is the only one we have that problem?
I think there might be a couple others, but I think like the whole thing is if you buy waterfront, you're looking at $2 million, right? If you're not really on the water, you're not buying that. Like it's cheaper to have property that's further away from your water. They don't own that.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, are we treating everybody fair around the lake?
Well, I think that's what we're trying to do. That's what we're trying to do.
On this little group of people.
I think
That's in my mind. I
Yeah.
just wanted to say there's that.
No, I think this whole process is that's what we're trying to do, right? Establish some consistent measures and what we're doing, like buoys and all that type of thing is. There's slight nuances in different places, but generally speaking, where do we want to go? What can we or can't we do? And being consistent, fair to everyone. The lake is there for everybody to join. And probably the most important thing is ensuring that our infrastructure is protected. And I think.
Yeah, you're not, so you're like, again, unfortunately, we do have infrastructure in the foreshore around the entire lake. So again, something to think about is there is sanitary sewer around the entire foreshore. That we need unrestricted access to, so we start allowing docks and everything along the foreshore, so this thing of not having to hop docks with maintenance stuff. Or just something like that.
And so what about the people that have docks out there right now? Why can't we say to them, look, this is our land and this is our foreshore and.
And that's exactly what you're discussing right now, is
Right.
how to approach the property owners that have infrastructure in the foreshore.
They're going on forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I may say, again, the challenge here is as per this section 5.1.2.0, which is in the Foreshore Lake zoning bylaw. It specifically states that these individuals can apply to the town for a permit. To put that infrastructure in the, to put their play toys and their boats and their docks in the foreshore. It's the only area in town that has this clause. And so we have previously, in a sense, authorized the use of that foreshore. It's just that the permit process doesn't exist. And it can't exist under the current lease arrangement.
So what are you recommending?
Yeah.
Going back to these people on,
What do we?
saying at least that we do we call it, buoy system?
Well, I guess at this, well, maybe we should move on to that
Let's
section.
talk about that.
Let's talk about the lease program.
Okay,
So I'll let Brittany go through what happened during the engagement, and then we can talk a little bit more about what that means.
so we asked the community, we provided a little overview of what a buoy lease program is to the community, and we asked them, would you support something like this on Osoyoos Lake? And 57% said yes, they would, 20% were opposed and 23% were neutral. I think more because there was a bit of misunderstanding of what actually a buoy lease program was. But the folks who were in support of it indicated in their comments that they thought this program would be really great because it would address a lot of the safety concerns existing with too many boats on the lake, as well as environmental health concerns as well. It came up quite a bit in the comments that folks feel unsafe swimming because there's too many boats on the lake, or if they're doing non-motorized activities such as paddling, that they feel unsafe with all the boats. So 57% thought this was a good idea. So I'll go into what is a buoy lease program as a bit of a reminder here. So it requires annual registration of buoys placed in lake areas that are adjacent to public lands. Benefits of this is it manages the number of boat users on the lake. It reduces environmental impacts in that sense and can reduce safety concerns for non-motorized users as well. And it also ensures that the legal use of the lake, so it's in accordance with what the foreshore leases are allowing. The implications of this is the monitoring and enforcement associated with a program like this is quite huge. It's very demanding and very costly as well. So we did look at Cultus Lake because they have this program right now, and they have a separate bylaw to regulate it. And they permit a number of 220 buoys on their lake. There's a $500 annual fee. If you apply late, then you have to pay an extra 10%. of that fee. They have a registration period from late January into mid-March, so if you go apply after mid-March, they're subject to the late fee. And they conduct compliance checks annually in the summer to make sure everyone is compliant with what the bylaw says, and if not, then they're subject to some more fines and penalties. You can have 2 family members per buoy that are registered to using that buoy. And you can only have 1 buoy assigned to you. The buoys need to be placed a minimum of 25 meters away from the high water mark of the lake and 15 meters away from any other wharf or buoy. So these are kind of the high level regulations that are imposed in their bylaw, which is the boating and foreshore bylaw.
So can I ask who, at Cultus Lake, is it just managed by? Who looks after it? And my concern is that in the town, we have a section of the lake. Area A has a section, the OIB has a section, and the Americans, which, you know, so we've got 4 jurisdictions here. Who manages Cultus Lake? Is it one jurisdiction? Is it all under one?
I think it's just under one. They do mention in the bylaw as well that, you know, the boats need to be in compliance with Transport Canada regulations, etc. But they don't have the multiple jurisdictions that Osoyoos Lake has, and there's not really many other examples that we can pull from with the buoy program with this multi-jurisdictional.
Might make it, yeah.
Right, thank you, Mayor Pro. So as Brittany mentioned, and we're going through a lot of information here. If in the distant future, we were looking at implementing a buoy lease program, and just talking about it right now. We would have those buoys in front of town-owned property. So examples of where that might be is again, Lakeshore Drive, we have all that property there, maybe at the north end of Lions Park, maybe in that Jasmine Drive area that we just talked about in that, I mean, there would be certain areas. You want to go on to the next slide, maybe. Again, if these would be like, these are just possible next steps or items that we might want to consider just in talking about it, because the agreement with Urban Systems is not to develop a program, but just to take this opportunity while we were already having conversation with the community to just see and, you know, just introduce the idea to see if there's interest in it. Some things we'd have to consider is that we'd have to do a professional review of the capacity of the lake to determine where it would be appropriate to have what number of buoys. We'd also have to consider options for contracted services for the program. We don't have the capacity or infrastructure to support such a program. So, you know, as you're thinking about this, might be something down the road. Bear in mind there are costs associated with it. And then we would have to determine if a buoy lease program is even feasible for us. And again, it would take about 3 years to implement a program if we were even to consider it. And there are a number of costs associated with it.
Totally understand.
So we brought it forward as an item of conversation during the update to the Foreshore Lake zoning bylaw. Just because we thought it was a great opportunity to have the conversation with the public, because we were going to be talking about the zoning bylaws.
So now we're totally overwhelmed.
I thought that might happen.
Well, I mean, and we are, I mean, I think that we see the need to talk about all these things. We kind of need some help in what can we legally do, what's the recommended, and what can we afford to do.
Right.
Another thing.
So our foreshore leases would also have to be amended to allow for such a program again in the future. Right now, the province has suggested that they would entertain that option.
Okay.
Definitely. And again, our foreshore leases are coming up for renewal. And I think given the fact that this is an idea in its infancy, we would renew them based on the way they're currently written. Again, it would still be something, a topic of conversation for council. don't think we could resolve it at this particular time.
I don't think so. Go ahead.
So you're talking about a workshop on the 10th of June, so if you've got questions already kind of made up for the public?
The workshop on the 10th of June is just for short-term rentals.
Oh, that's correct, sorry. So is there any date to forward about this issue?
We have a stakeholder workshop on Monday to chat with stakeholders about this topic and short-term rentals. And we have invited folks from Oasis and Fulton to attend, so they'll be able to provide some of their feedback and comments at that time.
Good. Thank you.
And then we would come forward the results of those meetings.
Yes.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Well, thank you very much, Brittany, for putting this all together. It makes it quite easy to well, not easy to comprehend, but it's certainly easy to see what you've compiled from the last meeting. So thank you very much.
No problem. A lot of things for you to consider. I'll just go over quickly our next steps. So the stakeholders workshop is on Monday, and the date is not to be determined. That we're having it Monday evening, and we've invited 20 to 30 people to attend, I would say. It seems like there's a good response rate, and that's going to be hosted virtually. To chat about the foreshore and some of the zoning bylaw items for short-term rentals.
Just to clarify, that is by invitation.
Yeah.
So that we have representatives from the hotels and destination associates, et cetera, and local business owner operators and as Brittany points out, representatives of those areas that we just talked about.
Yeah. And then the short-term rentals workshop is gonna be on the Saturday, June 10th for a couple of hours. So we don't have set questions for that yet, but we wanted to talk to you first to find out where your sort of opinions lie before we go back to the public. So we'll be drafting some questions for that soon. And then later in June, after we've had all of these consultations, we'll be putting together a memo outlining some of the things that we've heard for you to consider as well, and then we'll come back for another chat.
So in September or the last one, the meeting with council, or are you?
Oh, that would be, that the next meeting of council will be before September.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you just know how
You'll be on holiday.
difficult it is.
Yes,
to-
of course.
No, not just me, but everybody else is on holidays too. So that's why I was wondering, sometimes it's hard to set off at the
Yeah.
summertime.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The people at the water slides, they're gonna be impacted by this too, right? Cause they're gonna wanna put boats out there. I mean, the guy that built it already bought his boat, and this is where they park it. So,
I'm sorry, Councilor Bennett, the water slide?
yeah,
Oh, the water side property.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. That is gonna be another
So
area where people are gonna wanna put buoys and like, well, they're already doing.
I just thought I'd mention, because
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much. Can we take 5 minutes? Yes. You did.
Information over the.
We just need to. Then we're gonna get Oh, please, we got to have a reset, okay? You moving,
Really do.
okay, 1, 2, thank you. So do we need a motion to open up the meeting? then?
Yes, we need a motion to review.
Oh, sorry, we don't have Councillor Bennett here. Should we wait with that?
Here.
Oh, here he comes. Okay. All right, so we need a motion to whatever the official reconvene. Councillor Patrick and Councillor King, all in favor. Thank you. Okay. We are now moving on to staff reports. And we have the first one from the Director of Community Services.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council. Just for the lighter side of the morning. I just wanted to do a quarterly report from January 1st to March 31st for the Community Services Department. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things and then I don't know if you have any questions. In terms of the Sun Bowl Arena, we opened up a new skate library in February. The Sun Bowl Figure Skating Club had a really good performance for their skate program this year. And of course, we held our 49th annual Adam Fiesta. So next year will be the 50th year. Will also be the 50th year of the Sun Bowl Arena. In terms of the Sonora Community Center, we held our Family Day event on February 20th, the annual event that we do. Some winter programs include Women in Solitude, kickboxing for women. Obviously, pickleball is quite a huge event throughout the year. And just a note, 869 drop-ins were done during this time. In terms of our parks, our park washroom renovations were completed. Cottonwood, Lions, Kinsman, Pioneer Walkway, and Desert Park. They're open and functional right now. And Scent Garden was started, and will be actually done here pretty quick. In terms of special events, during the first quarter, we processed 8 special event applications, and 7 of those will be held in the second, third, and fourth quarters of this coming year. And in terms of committees, council appointed 3 members at large for the town for the Community Services Advisory Board. We will convene with meetings in the second quarter. The Accessibility and Age Friendly Committee, council appointed 5 members. Another one will be appointed this afternoon. And we will convene with appointments as well, or meetings as we go forward in the second quarter. And our Grant Evaluation Committee, which was a new committee, we actually met a few times and got a few recommendations to council already. That would be my report.
Good, thank you very much. I was just looking at the capital projects and some of them that were completed and behind schedule. So the 2 that are behind schedule, are you able to comment on those?
Yes, Madam Mayor. So our pickleball courses, I've been meeting with the pickleball club to make sure what we're doing there is everything inclusive of what they want, and we're sort of still discussing that, but that will move forward. And the accessible fishing pier, we had a meeting just yesterday with Parks PC. OIB is involved with that as well. And we just want to keep things moving with that. A portion of this 50,000 is RMI funding. The total project cost, because they haven't actually done the final design, will be coming forward, and we'll see where we are with that. The 50,000 is the allocation from RMI that was going to be spent by March of 2024. The money that we've had for the last couple of years.
Okay, thank you. And I see that we have a community celebration plan for later this month. So I'm assuming that we'll have a meetings or something.
Yes, Madam Mayor. So May 26th, it's going to be an annual barbecue. Prior to COVID, we did a couple of these, and one was to actually open up Gyro Park when it was first completed. And we're just hoping that council will be available, because it might be asked to do some domestic
cooking and cleaning, no problem. Anybody else have any questions of Mr. Davis? No? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Davis. Our corporate services report, Mr. Tilton.
Thank you, Mayor Corda. I'll just touch on a few items as well for our department. I just wanted to highlight that bylaw concerns have increased drastically from the first quarter of 2022 to 2023. We're seeing 386 last year and 601 in the first quarter of this year. Largely, I would say it's animal control. So just a friendly reminder, we saw a massive increase of dogs at large. So a friendly reminder for people to register your dogs and ensure that they are kept in their backyards and they're on leashes when they're out in our parks and walking on public sidewalks. I will highlight on our capital project in 2022. We are delayed due to staffing, trying to implement our payroll software for timesheets. It's in coordination with the financial services department. And then just trying to kind of staff has been, it's kind of been our challenge right now. Otherwise, it's been working. We've also started to go over communication in the third quarter of 2022. And so I just wanted to highlight that currently there is 1,030 subscribers to the town's e-news, which was 23 new subscribers in the first quarter of 2023. So this will be a new step that council will see on quarterly. And I just want to talk about our strategic plan update because Market Services strategic plan was doing a corporate communication strategy. We are currently a little behind schedule, but we have been working on it. And as part of that, our team has been rebranding the town's newspaper advertisements. We have been doing upgrades to the town's website, which includes branding, consolidation of web pages, and looking at ease of access for users. We've also been looking at utilizing Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and we're researching apps for cell phones and looking at what other municipalities provide. So we will be bringing a report probably forward in June to showcase this. Quite a bit of my time has been spent on human resource matters. So we've had 13 job postings and interviews combined. This is up from 10 from last year in the first quarter. I wanted to highlight the number of concerns that have been received through our iCampus portal. So if there are citizen concerns, we track those, and that'll be a new stat that we're actually going to break down this year. But last year in the first quarter, there were 101 concerns received. This first quarter, there's 191 concerns received, and there we have a listing that kind of broken down what the common concerns are. And then finally, I just wanted to mention with the departure of our executive assistant in third quarter of 2022, some of those duties have carried over to corporate services department, and so quite a bit of our time is also spent on those duties in the assistant mayor and council. And so yeah, that is our report to the first quarter. Thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate it. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I see you're mentioning traffic concerns. There's 9 of them. Do we get that tickets? We actually give out?
We break that down, then we do warnings. We really try to give warnings first. So if they notice a violation, for example, I'm just gonna pick a truck park relation fee, we would probably go give a warning first and then check back. But if it would be 2 hours, they would check back. If it was overnight, we might give them a warning the first night, and then the second night go back and actually and check. So we do try to be proactive in we try to be friendly first, and then enforcement. We're trying to.
That's a different question. Then have we sent any tickets? So
Yes, they have. That's broken down. There have been 9 infractions. So they've given out 79 warnings and 9 infractions.
and have we collected any money? Or does it cost more than?
I could get that further down for you, broken down the number that it paid, but I would say we are 70, I would say about 75% we do receive payment, and then 25%. And I just want to get some from that spreadsheet that I saw for sent collections.
Thank you.
Good. Anything else? Thank you, Mrs. Hilson. Next is our financial services department, Mr. Zacko.
Thank you very much for that. So mine's more all numbers comparisons, so accounts payable, invoices processed 2019 compared to 2022 at 900. Accounts receivable, we processed 101 invoices for the first quarter, which we've got 42 accounts with outstanding balances of $464,384. Most of that is all current, $445,383 of that is current. Under our capital projects, computer equipment, everything's scheduled to be on time as of completing the end of September. So it's purchased around upgrading different programs and softwares. Under our cemetery, unfortunately, it hasn't been as busy. At the cemetery, we've only had 6 interments in the first quarter compared to 20 in 2022. For our financial update, general fund, we have a projected surplus right now of $263,300. Majority of that is return on investments, surplus of $200,000 and contingency $50,000. Under our sewer fund, we've got a surplus of $30,000 in the water fund. We got a surplus of $30,000 as well. And the Sun Bowl Arena right now is projected to be right on budget. For payroll, $889,353 was processed for payroll first quarter, compared to $963,850 in 2022. Property taxes in the first quarter, we have 13 properties still that are in pending tax sale position. We're continually trying to be in contact with these property owners and try to get these things cleared up in time. We have 148 properties that were in tax arrears for $239,719. We've got 1.56 million collected already for prepaid taxes, which is very nice to see. Quite a number, 499 property owners taking advantage of that. Under utility billing, we got our utilities for rural water, rural sewer out a month early this year, so we're seeing numbers in our first quarter for 2023 where in previous years there were no numbers in there. So at this time I'll ask council if you have any questions.
Go ahead.
Question. Back at the top there, we have a few people that are 30 to 60 days. How long do we let them go before we send them something?
Usually after 60 days, we are sending them a special letter to get the collections happening. We have not had to do any of our accounts receivable in recent years of setting them up for collections. We've collected everything on this ones. A few of them are just.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Good, thank you very much, Mr. Zackel. Next is our Osoyoos Fire Rescue.
Thank you, your worship. Our is on getting trained. So I will just hit a couple highlights and get additional questions. I'll attempt to answer, or we'll contact our fire chief later and provide one. That's kind of determined. I think some of the keys here are just they are receiving more call outs. So in the first quarter this year, about 54 compared to 39 last year. So like I said, that's a big concern. We don't like seeing that trend going up, but that's where we're at. There's also a rise in structural fires and false alarms. So we always encourage people to check their alarm system and that type of thing. So just some of that maintenance that will not only produce discomfort for those residents and their businesses, but also it does impact our paid on call folks. So just for people to do a little bit more check on some of their alarm systems. And I think the other key thing that drives our paid on call folks is the number of training hours. We spent a lot of time doing that, and maybe last quarter there was hours of training. That includes the fire chief report.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to add that I was pretty impressed with the fireman's ball. And it was totally packed, it was unbelievable, it wasn't advertised. And I have to say, the fire chief and those two captains that basically they were there in their cities. And I said, you guys aren't dressed up. And they said, this is a volunteers event, and we're just here enjoying it. Although the fire chief got cut up with some me, but this is not our event, this is for the fire. I thought that was really classy. Probably been.
And I
And
understand.
raised it,
Yeah. Yeah, I think they did. Somebody said, and I can't remember what it was, but they raised a lot of money, so that was good. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Risling. And now we have our operational services report from Mr. Brownstein.
Thank you, Worship. Just some quick highlights. We did install some water services in the first quarter. We've done a lot of sanitary sewer maintenance. We had to redo the effluent service for the West Bench Golf Park. Did some upgrades at the Osoyoos golf course. We had to do a mainline repair of a main next to Peanut Pond. So we've been busy doing a lot of reactive work this first quarter. Irrigation, we rebuilt and repaired a motor mount and a pump for irrigation station 8, as well as replaced the booster pump at irrigation booster station 8A. Road work, as you notice, we've been busy sweeping, picking up sand. Sign replacements, pothole repairs. We've done a lot of painting with our guardrails, trying to improve the look. Turf management, placement of Baltimore trail community, so you'll see a lot of fresh park mulch placed around trees and parks and everything else, trying to spruce things up. Installed some new lights in the fountain in front of town hall. We all the ability to do color changing there as well as the fountain on Fire Walkway. We did some minor repairs at Veterans Park, cemetery, ongoing burials, irrigation activation, all that kind of fun stuff. Fleet, we placed orders for a new dump truck, a new landscape truck, and 3 new light trucks, which will hopefully all be in service by the end of 2024. Capital project wise, we have a total of 26 on the books for this year. This is down from last year. We'll be doing some major projects, hopefully coming up in so we'll do this engineering. And again with the master plans. Capital project wise, the majority of our projects are on schedule. There are some that have been delayed due to process issues. I will also ask questions if they feel fit in regards to those. We are down for promotion requests for the quarter from last year, which is nice to see. A lot of us weren't having up with some competitive maintenance activities. Any questions?
The money that we got from the trying to think which one it was, and it wasn't the plaza, it was the one to fix our wells, to protect the wells. Yes, to protect the wells, we got, I
Oh, the
think.
exploration we talking? Like athletic. Yes.
Yes.
Well, wait a second, yes. Okay. Those are still in preliminary discussions with both our electrical engineer and our civil engineer. So those have not been put on the floor plan yet. We have till 2025.
Oh, okay, so we've got some time to spend that. Okay, thank you. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, Madam Mayor. You ordered 2 or 3 trucks. Is there an update when you might receive them?
So those will be here hopefully late 2024, early 2025. We missed the 2023 order intake from most fleet vehicles. So now we're waiting for the 2024 order intake, and I believe Ford will be releasing that September this year, and hopefully we're high enough on the list that we're gonna get in.
Okay. Anything else? All right, thank you very much, Mr. Brownstein. And we will look at the planning department now. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor Reportoff. So We've been very, very busy, as you can imagine, as our presentation this morning, from Brittany, we are well on our way through our zoning bylaw, foreshore lake bylaw and short-term rental, public consultation process. And, looking at presenting options to council. Again, the RMI projects, the Urban Heritage Park is completed across the street. If you haven't been over there, go and have a look. It looks really great, and that is at the new museum Heritage Park. Parks master plan and the charrette, working on with Director Davis on that, and now we're looking at we're just in the roads of preparing the RFP for that. Again, pretty busy start to the year. 399 business licenses were renewed and now 30 new ones. So that's always a good sign. Development permit applications and no zoning applications in the first quarter. I have included our summary of the residential development projects again. I'm not sure if council wants to keep seeing that, but I just put it in here so you just kind of a reminder of where we're at with some things. You'll notice that the grand total number has been reduced. As a couple of projects did drop off the list for at least the time being. And a lot of inspections going on, and that kind of leads me to probably the high point of our department right now, although it didn't happen in the first quarter. But we welcomed Brian McClure into our fold over there at P&D, and so Brian's over here to get a handle on what happens over here in this exciting room. And also, I think it was a perfect day for him to be here, both with the presentation from Urban Systems and also with the quarterly report. So we're really happy to have Brian on our team now. Thank you.
Welcome, Brian. Thank you. Yes. Can I go back to the
Yes.
the resident? I've got the same problem as you. The residential development projects sheet that you have there, and 6828 89th Street, right, as 40 condos, and it was 2023 the date.
Correct. So, thank you, Mayor McClure. So you'll recall that project included the 5 townhomes up on Negaw. They've been issued the building permit for the 5 townhomes.
Okay.
And they're going to start construction fairly quickly on those. They are going to start the construction on the condos, this year as well.
Okay. I just when
Yes.
I drive by all the time, I don't see any action, and I wonder.
Right, and so that property has been subdivided and a covenant has been registered on the condominium parcel to have rentals only for at least the first 10 years.
Right. And will that be, sorry, can I, just one more question? It's when the project is done and it opens, that's when the 10 years starts?
That's correct.
Good, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a quick question on 5-300 and 5-003 Lake Shore, your water slide. Do you know when they're gonna start construction?
Thank you. That's a very good question, Councilor Bennett. So, the reason I mentioned that a couple of projects have dropped off because they don't know when they're coming forward. But this particular project, they have just informed us they are going to move forward with it. So they probably won't start, further site investigation until the fall, but that project is moving forward. A lot of people kind of pulled back a bit, not sure where the economy is going, and they've now
Very
confirmed that.
soon they starting tomorrow, so we get rid of all the white. The trees.
Oh, the economy.
Oh, there's lots of that. Up in the top, if you go up there, it looks like there's, middle of winter, so much of it. So somebody asked me, I'd ask. That's why.
Oh, so they're not necessarily excited about the project, just getting rid of conduits.
Okay, no more questions. Thank you very much.
Thank
Ms.
you.
McKay. And next we have the report from strategic priorities from our CAO. Mr. Ridley.
Thank you, your worship. Council's done quite a bit of work so far, just attempting to establish priorities, both from that overall community perspective, and also about a month ago, reapproved infrastructure priorities, and they're a little bit different, but they're in the same vein as to ensure I guess transparency to residents and businesses as far as what the priorities of the community are. Plus, it also helps administration focusing their energy on what the council's priorities are. So we've committed to bringing both these documents to council quarterly to give you an opportunity to get status updates, which we have included a lot of the status updates within the quarterly reports, but to also give you the opportunity to add items or move things around. I do want to emphasize that on the council priorities chart, that, you know, once a lot of energy has gone into a lot of the priorities already, and so when priorities change, there is lots of maybe some of that momentum on that project, but that is ultimately council's decision on where you want to go. As far as the infrastructure priorities chart, that was only approved 3 or 4 weeks ago. Council knew at the time when they approved this, that again, the goalposts here were pretty wobbly, and as more information became available, like the active transportation plan and other plans, that would firm up some of the pieces contained within. So I don't think there's too much information presented to council over the last 2 or 3 weeks since this project or this infrastructure strategy was approved. But again, it's up to council to debate and or make proposed changes. So the council take a look. So how it is structured, that there are the 2 original documents that were passed with some track changes in them. And it's done on the infrastructure side. It's changed. The strategic priorities chart, it was the original document that was approved back in December with track changes plus some dialogue as to why, what was the status of it. And the attachments 3 and 4 are the actual attachments that include administration's recommendations as far as maybe timing changes or the updated next step on a particular priority. So we're open for questions and debate, to see where council would like to go, or maybe the whole.
So it seems to be very common that we set goals for things and something else will come in to delay it a little bit. That happens all the time. So we appreciate the fact that you put in the green and the red lettering and an updated form. I think that was very helpful to see both. Thank you very much.
I appreciate that work, but I think the whole process, I think, is new for us and for council, and a lot of times we're pretty optimistic as far as administration and trying to get things done, but there are kind of other priorities that occur, water breaks or other things that happen. I think the positive of having such a chart is it gives a snapshot that it's continually on our mind. We do review this monthly at our management team meetings just to keep the momentum going. So over time, I think we'll get better at certain timelines, that type of thing, but it's always going to be a moving target. We hear continually, we were probably 5 minutes ago ordering a pickup truck. It's kind of ordered, we're in a queue, we're hoping we're in a queue for 2024, so that pickup truck is not going to come until likely late 2024, which 2 years ago, we couldn't pick that pickup truck up in 2 weeks, that might be a problem. So everything has changed, but I like the format so that it's transparent and it keeps us focused on certain priorities.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Go ahead, Councilor King.
I guess on your first chart, you kind of, some stuff's been accomplished already in the first quarter. I see they got lines through them. Then you go down to your next strategic priority chart dated today, I guess, or close to the date. When you talk about water making campaign next steps in June, we're talking about moving that a couple years down the road. So is that still like?
So I think, Councilor, I can give maybe a couple comments and then the director can provide additional. So with regards to the water metering, we are working on the RFP as we speak, and it should be out in a few weeks. We're just doing the final fine tuning. We are hearing various rumors out there as far as supplies, just like everything else, that getting supplies such as water meters, et cetera, there is a significant delay of several months, maybe 6 to 8 months. It's just that whole supply chain issue. So even on the communication side, one of the things we are considering is potentially some of the communications embedding within the contract. So what we're finding is we've talked to council before about, we're kind of at a staffing level like for 5,500, and we've got a ton of things on the go here. And so I think more of the things that we can find that we can maybe farm out or include in the project, or find experts in the field, and that's what we want to at least explore. Not saying that's what we'll do, but at least something that we'll explore. Maybe if Director
Thanks, you. I guess with this highlighted in the thing with water metering campaign next steps. We're looking to include that informational piece within the RFP, as everything was already pointed out. So, I guess my question to the committee is what are you looking for in regards to the water metering campaigns to make sure that I'm encompassing it in the RFP? Or are you looking for something else that's, you want done prior to an RFP being released, people will start talking about this path? I think that's my question.
I think that we've committed to doing the water metering campaign. We've had, is that Habit? That did
The initial engagement with the community.
yes, and they put a little brochure up. I think people have kind of bought into it, and we need to get going on it. We don't want to forget about it. We don't want to postpone it. I think we need to, and I agree, if there's things that we need to order, like the water meters, the actual meters that go into houses, those have to be built at this point. They aren't sitting on a shelf somewhere.
None of the volumes are looking at.
Yeah. So I think let's go ahead with it. We agreed this was something that was important, and I think we've done a fair amount of work on trying to sell it. And I think we should.
So I just want to confirm with the committee that technically I can take the water metering campaign off of the strategic priority, because we've already kind of tackled that over here. We will continue to tackle it as we we'll start to install water meters in that one here.
But don't take it off of there just because otherwise we'll forget.
So we forgotten about this. I just want to, again, this is part of our priorities.
You know,
So if I've met the committee's wants and needs in regards to communication, then this comes off and then something else fills its spot. It's not forgotten about, it's just taken off the list.
okay. I get it. Go ahead.
Just something, Madam Mayor. Did we get any negative feedback? I didn't hear anything. When you did.
The majority of the feedback we got via the Osoyoos Water Smart website was looking for clarification. Looking for more information, which we provided in the Q&A at the bottom of the website. Besides that, I haven't had any real feedback from the community on meters, like the typical social media comments, which we all see and read. Other than that, I haven't had anything, and that would be something that will be council will do.
I am.
Go ahead.
There's another, I guess, on that side, you can very broadly. With our water consumption starting to ramp up here pretty quick. There's an opportunity for us to really push the usage and consumption message of, here's what we're going to get to, here's what we go with. I think Habit did a really good job of starting, but I think we've kind of let that kind of slide flat there. Is there a way that we can really kind of push that messaging that we go with the next couple of months?
That's through the chair to Councilor, definitely. I have no. This all comes down to the budget question. It should be able to find some money to re-engage Habit and maybe look at some water consumption information being pushed out. We probably will be looking coming back sometime in June in regards to water consumption and increasing our water restrictions. Currently we are not seeing the bans, but with this next little bit of heat we're getting, we'll probably see some issues come up on every regards to water demand. I'm hoping last year was a little bit of scare that the community got in regards to our ability to provide water, maybe resonates with them a bit this year, but again, we will again try to engage the public again. Thank you.
That's a good idea. Go ahead. Thank you, Mayor. I guess you relate to community services here. Your rated shutter has been installed, so this would come off the list, and I see you've got a couple other things, maybe something that would go on. About amalgamating buildings or some other multi-purpose facility could go on to your strategic plan.
Right now, the chiller is actually at the Subway Arena.
Yeah.
So that is in place. It's not installed yet, and that for sure will be done and then put in place so we can open it third week in July. But yes, that could be moved and something else could be put in there. The amalgamation of the recreation buildings, I'm not exactly sure what step we would be at for something like that.
Well, I see on the strategy, there's two things, whether it's amalgamating buildings or consideration of a multi-person facility. So maybe at the next quarter report, something will come off and something will go on.
And I think one of the items that was listed is when we had the meeting with the other council and Oliver. One of the items I think during that time was the aquatic center, but also as a long-term vision, to look at amalgamating some of our facilities for cost savings, staffing, utilities, etc. But right at this point in time, there's really been nothing even initiated to that.
You got your aquatic center on your list already, so I just look at you took the chiller off. I mean, you might not get it till next year, but these will still be something that we feel is important to move forward.
There will definitely be another item coming forward in the next quarter.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, is there anything else that we need to talk about this morning?
We answered yours.
Oh,
So,
sorry.
yeah, so there's probably just a couple issues, that you were gonna hit it, so. What administration's hearing, when the council comes back with a motion, we're gonna be, basically taking off water meter campaign. Number 2 priority, that's, I mean, absolutely, it's not forgotten.
Yeah.
Then you can start going off the rails, it's not something we're gonna forget, but as far as a proactive messaging thing at this stage, that's taken off, so. There are a ton of other things that, are next on the list. And there are several of these are actually in the works, and coming to you over the next few months. And so this is council opportunity to talk about, what you want to place in priorities. I can tell you that, say there are a couple that are scheduled to come forward, as administration is working on them regardless, which includes the water and wastewater plans. A little bit of work actually being done on fees and bylaws charges from the recreation perspective. So I can tell you from an administration perspective, there's been a ton on the go. Obviously, this is a council's document. You can base additional for different priorities, but I think my recommendation would be to stick to something on the list that's here and put one of those ones that administration had no choice but to start working on, which would include either, maybe water and wastewater plan, because those are completed anyways. I think we're pretty close to the tapped out stage. Some of these we have to work on anyways. And yes, my recommendation would be to stick one in the top 5 that we're already doing. And if you have some additional items that you want to talk about, to add them on the list, but further down. So I'll let you debate whether number 1, number 2 is coming off and insert one of the others, which the administration could be recommending, water, wastewater plan or different.
I think so. One thing that you discussed earlier in the meeting, and I realized we're starting to run a little late, is the feasibility of servicing again sanitary sewer outside of our boundaries. So is that a priority? And also, is that something you want popped up in my list of things to do? To look at that potential that will be to continue to service outside of our boundaries.
I think if we stop here for now, I don't see that. I've heard today.
I don't really either, but I think that we had something, somebody come present today, and I think somehow we have to answer that. It may be, sorry, we've decided that we're not working on that right now, and we can't do it. And if that's what happens, I'm fine with that. I'm wondering about the asset management. I know it seems to affect everybody, but other people at Silga sort of said, well, gee, yeah, we're getting close to getting this done. And I thought from listening here that we're not anywhere close to that. And I'm wondering if that should be moved up. And I'm sorry,
So your worship, in regards to asset management, we are doing some very high level asset management in regards to our water and wastewater system.
Good.
So that is being completed in conjunction with the water master plan, the wastewater master plan, so we have a very high level asset management plan, not detailed, not something that will allow, for that deep dive into the costs associated with running the water and wastewater system. However, there are asset management programs still needed for our facilities. There's asset management programs still needed for our roads. There's still asset management plan needed for our park infrastructure and parks. So that could be something also is looking at adding to the strategic priority list. Is looking at those other avenues.
anybody else?
I just go sideways here. If you kind of go sidebar on the water meters, then I guess corporate service could take off their water meter billing process.
No, because there's a lot of stuff that's going to be in different places. Just like that. So
That's gonna be a very large project, debating whether you do monthly, quarterly, you do first 10 cubes embedded in a flat rate, there's a ton of analysis that we do those kind of lots.
The water meter not up moving up that trailer park. It's on the next.
The long-term options, you've got it under next up at the top.
Let's
You can.
have the conversation.
We can.
Have we finished the conversation with Jared on it? Like 3 questions ago? Are we just?
Sorry. Okay, let's go back.
I'm sitting there going like, what's that got to do with what Jared?
So go ahead, Mr. Brownstein. We're just looking at the list that's up here and trying to figure out what to move on next. So have we answered your?
So your worship, through the Councilor Bennett, as far as I'm concerned, I'm good with the water metering thing. I think you guys have given me an appropriate direction, but I no longer have to fulfill this line item because we've addressed it in a way that's satisfied the county's wants and needs. It will not be lost. It will be part of the RFP process, and we do a communication plan with the proponent. However, the one thing that was highlighted is bringing a little bit more communication to the community in regards to demand and consumption requirements, which we will do anyway. But yes, thank you.
Is that okay? Yeah.
I just thought we were kind of road sidewalks.
Sorry, yeah, we jumped in all over the place too. Yeah, and I do think we need to look at, how people starting to sprinkle their lawns and that type of thing. You need to be careful with how we do that. Is there anything else then? See that,
Take something off, or we're gonna move another item up.
so the trailer parking,
I'd like to hear that just.
That's potentially one,
Okay.
that we do know, I can say that the water master plan, wastewater plans are, those are certainly on the list. Well, they're moving up to the council priorities, because those are scheduled to come forward in June. Those were on those were on council list.
Yeah.
so some of those are, have already been moved down here and are being talked about, so. I think to me, we're good. I think we should be working with ones that we've got here right now. And if at your next meeting, you think that one is off, should be moved off the list, because it's been done, then we appreciate that. And if there's something else that is important to add next, then we'd like to hear that.
So your worship, I guess my recommendation would be to the committee is bring up the water master plan and wastewater master plan into number 5. So that way it's a program that's already in works. We're not adding extra work to senior management. We're not asking further work into administration to make those top 5 priorities happen. So those are projects that's already in play. It gives us the clear definition of one of your top 5. And then once those 2 fall off, and then we can come back and have a conversation about some other projects that are again. A lot of these are sitting in the wings and they are actually happening off on the side of some of our desks. But again, this allows me to say, okay, you want the water master plan, the wastewater master plan are top 5 for you guys. I'll make sure that they get done in an appropriate fashion.
That sounds fine to me. Is everybody okay with that?
Yeah, make one comment.
Yes.
On these charts, can we put dates on them? Like you got this dated May 9th.
Yeah.
And is that like the day, right?
Yeah, that's it. So we took that direction, and that's why, if you notice, actually in the strategic priority chart previously, there was no date.
Yeah.
We went forward with the infrastructure strategy, last go around, that was a request of council to actually put a date on. And so our infrastructure strategy on attachment 2, it did have a date of April 11th. Now, the 2 that you're going to be approving or recommending to approve the council, both have dates of May 9th. Which is today, probably changes to May 22nd. When you actually approve stuff, so the date,
Okay.
they always know what the longer it is. Yep, both have a date, smaller fonts. But they both have May 9th on them.
So you're looking at us to make some recommendations here based on your report. And we've looked at 1 and 2, so I'm not sure, are we ready to just say that the amended things on May 9th are acceptable?
Yes, I think the
So,
motion.
Attachment 3 and attachment 4.
So I think there was 2 changes to attachments 3 and 4. And so the motion can actually be 1 and 2, or probably 3 and 4, and 3 and 4 would actually. The infrastructure one doesn't change, so you can recommend that council adopt attachment 4 as is. And attachment 3, there's 2 changes to what's proposed here. One is to remove water metering campaign and insert the water master plan, waste water plan to item number 5. So those are the 2 changes that are within the
Okay.
attachment 3.
So moved.
It's all moved and it's been
Okay.
seconded.
So moved by Councillor Bennett, seconded by
Councillor
Councillor
Potterica.
Potterica. That the committee will recommend that council approve the amended strategic priorities chart dated May 9th. With the following changes: by removing water metering campaign from the council priorities and replacing with the water and wastewater master.
Okay. All right, all in favor? Thank you.
And now we'll need a second motion for council to approve the infrastructure strategy. So that the committee of the whole party recommend that council approve the infrastructure strategy dated May 9th.
Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. So are we ready for the termination?
We are.
Dr. King,
Too early. We can do it.
your lunch is here. I've moved and